Welcome back, fellow humans, to the Scrub Lords channel. You guys all know what we're talking about, or do you? You probably don't. I didn't know what this was until a friend recommended this to me. His channel will be down in the description. He makes gaming videos. Go check him out. Different audience. I don't care. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about Parahumans, or Worm as the story is called, which to my knowledge is a sort of web novel or web series about superheroes. Hence the title. I don't know what the title is yet, but something along those lines. Now, let me pitch Worm, okay? It's written by a man named Wild Bow. I don't know if his real name is publicly out there. Maybe it is, but I know him as Wild Bow because that's what he is called in the Worm comment section after each chapter. But let me pitch Worm. It is a superhero story set in a, I believe, fictional city known as Brockton Bay. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's a real city. I didn't do any research. About a girl, a teenager, 15-year-old named Taylor. Now, people in this world go through what are known as trigger events, which are mainly very traumatic events that cause them to get superpowers. So, it's not... I won't get into Taylor's trigger event. Maybe we'll get into that later in the video. But Taylor is the average 15-year-old high schooler with superpowers. She wants to be a superhero. Problem is, her life kind of sucks. Her mom's dead. Her and her dad have a decent relationship, but it could be better. And she is relentlessly bullied at school by 3 bullies, one of which used to be her childhood best friend. So her life is kind of shit. So she decides she wants to be a superhero. And that's just what she does. Taylor has bug powers, or bug kinesis. She basically has control over every bug imaginable. She explains it as having control over simple-minded things, because at some points she uses crabs. But it's mostly just bugs. And she can see and sense and hear through the bugs, and she can control a bunch at one time. So that's basically her power. And she sets out to become a superhero. Now I'm going to go into a little bit of spoilers, so if that pitch alone got you and you want to read it, go check out Worm. Just type in Parahumans or Worm, Parahumans Worm, you'll find it. I'll put a link in the description, you know what? But if you want a little more than that, Taylor goes out on her first mission, and I kind of keep the spoiler free, right? No, I don't want to spoil any too much. But she goes out on her first mission, and she fights the leader of a gang known as the Asian Bad Boys. Now, the leader's name is Lung. Lung is an extremely overpowered character that I will get into in the spoiler section of this video. Regardless, Taylor fights him, and is about to lose until a team of supervillains known as the Undersiders show up. And they kind of look at her and they're like, hey, cool, have a good time. And they leave. But then they get a hold of her, they contact her, and they give her a little job. They're like, hey, do you want to join the team? Now, Taylor doesn't want to be a supervillain. She wants to be a superhero. But she doesn't really know how to do that, because she doesn't inherently want to join the superhero team. So she's, doesn't know a whole lot. So she decides to join the Undersiders undercover to gather information on them and their boss, and then expose them and become a superhero afterwards. So that's about as much as a pitch as I want to give without spoiling much. That happens in the first chapter or so. I should mention the web series is broken into chapters / arcs. So it'll be 1.1, 1.2, and they mostly go anywhere from 8 to 12 chapters in an arc. There are 30 arcs of Worm. I believe there's a sequel, but I have been avoiding that because I don't want spoilers. I don't even want to know much about it, and I think there's a couple spin-offs. That being said, this video will contain spoilers only for the first 10, but I'm not fully going to get into spoilers yet. I want to address I don't know how much art I will have to use for this video because I don't want to spoil anything for myself. So If there's not that much art or visually anything interesting on the screen, I apologize. I'm attempting to not spoil myself on Worm. Now, that being said, that's a pitch of the sort of story. I want to talk a little more about the universe before I talk about spoilers, right? I want to mention as well, there are interludes. I forgot to mention that. So in between each arc, there'll be like an interlude from a different perspective. I'll get into that in a little bit. But sort of the world. So there is a superhero team. It's known as the Protectorate. I think Protectorate. I believe that's how you say that. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. With like super OP superheroes, you know, you got like your speedsters and your Superman equivalent. They'll have different names and stuff. I'll get into them later when we get to the interludes. You've got the teen team known as the Wards, which are all like the teenagers who want to become superheroes, but are still teenagers, obviously. So imagine this sort of like the boys with the superhero teams. None of them are evil. It's not like the boys where it's like, oh, what if superheroes were pieces of shit? That's not the case here. But they do work for the government, and they're sort of like a corporation. Like, they do movies, and they do, you know, postcards and like toys and stuff like that. So they're also, it's sort of like that, but imagine if the boys superheroes were actually good. Like, that's kind of going on with the teams. And there are certain, obviously there's villain groups, which I'll get into later. But something I do want to mention is the Endbringers, which at the point I'm at in the story, I don't fully know what an Endbringer is. But it's basically, imagine a natural disaster in the form of a thing with superpowers. And they mention a couple times throughout the story that the entire island of Newfoundland is wiped off the map by one of these Endbringers. And at various points they mention stuff like that. So that's kind of what's happening in the universe. Like, you've just got fucked shit happening everywhere, and there's just people trying to be superheroes, and there's people trying to be supervillains. So that's a little more on the universe. I don't know how much more I have to say. I don't script these videos. I haven't scripted this part. So I don't know how much more I want to say on the beginning of Worm. Spoiler free, of course. But I will say, I do recommend Worm. It is very good, with some caveats, but I'll save my criticisms for the spoiler part. But go check it out. It's free. I believe the author wants to eventually turn it into a self-published novel or something like that. I'm a little unsure on that. But for now, it is free. Link in the description. Go check it out. And let's get into those spoilers. Alright, fellow humans. Before we get right into spoilers, I want to set the stage here. So a little bit of recap. Worm stars Taylor Hebert and a cascade of characters. The most important for now being Danny, Taylor's father, Emma and Sophia, her bullies, and the undersiders. There is Brian, a.k.a. Gru, Lisa, a.k.a. Tattletale, Bitch, a.k.a. Bitch. Her real name is Rachel, but really I'm probably just going to call her Bitch this whole time. And Alec, a.k.a. Regent. Now, the Undersiders are a group of villains that Taylor has infiltrated. Oh, I had to sneeze. Bless me. So the Undersiders are... I'm keeping that, by the way. This take is good. The Undersiders are a group of villains that Taylor has infiltrated to get information on, to sort of crack them to the heroes. Be like, hey, heroes, here you go. For now, the main heroes that matter are Armsmaster, and that's, for now, that's really it. So when we get to it later, we'll get to it later. Some set up for the universe. People with powers are called Parahumans, or capes, as some people call them. It's really the same thing. It doesn't matter. I'll just probably call them superheroes, because that's what they are. The big superhero team is known as the Protectorate, and there are the Wards, which is basically the Teen Titans, but it's the Protectorate for children. And the story, for now, takes place in a city known as Brockton Bay. That's basically all the mainstay things that are going to happen in the rest of Worm. So now that I have laid the foundation that is necessary, let's finally get right into the spoilers. Alright, fellow humans, welcome to the spoiler section of my Worm/Parahumans video. And first I want to say I was supposed to make this into 3 separate videos. As you could probably see by the length and title of this video, that is no longer the plan. Because Worm has me throwing my plans out like Tommen Baratheon threw his soon-to-be lifeless corpse out of a window of King's Landing. So we're just gonna roll with it. It's all gonna be in one video now, and to explain that, I was originally gonna read Worm has 30 arcs. I was going to read in segments of 10, make a video, and continue reading. Well, I hit a bit of a brick wall known as book too good, couldn't stop. So if that isn't an endorsement, then the previous intro to this video, I'm unsure what is. But you know what? Why don't we get right into the spoiler section, ladies and gentlemen? Alright. Talking these first couple arcs of Worm is honestly, it's a little slow. Pretty much arcs 1, the arcs have names. I kind of forgot to write some of them down, so we're just going to go by arcs. Talking the arcs, we got 1 to, I would say, 6 is sort of world building, right? Wildbow just kind of takes his time setting up the world. You get everything I explained with the foundation, and then you start to get some action. Like in 3, for Taylor's first ever thing outside, her first ever outing was fighting the leader of the Asian bad boys named Lung. But her second actual outing, and her first with the undersiders, is robbing a bank, which is a great idea to do when you're a hero undercover and you think, you know, what a great way to build reputation, to rob a bank, right? And you sort of just kind of get stuff like that. So that's arc 3, is them robbing the bank, which I think was the first time. The Lung fight's good, but the robbing the bank was the first time reading Worm where I went, okay, yeah, no, I'm here for the long haul. So definitely, if you're watching this video and you've never read Worm, and for some reason you've made it to the spoiler section, 1, get the fuck out, and 2, read up to arc 3. I think there's an audiobook version. I'll links in the description. But yeah, read up to the bank heist to see if it's for you. I could see why it wouldn't be for some people, but it is surprisingly well written. So you've got the bank heist, which, all things considered, goes pretty well for them. They encounter some heroes. This is the first time we meet the wards, which is a cacophony of characters that I don't know if I have the brain power to really get into. But there's like way too many characters in Worm. Okay, I'm just gonna come out and say it. There's a shit ton of characters, and for the most part, they're all well written and they're all cool, but holy shit, are there a lot. And they have regular people names, and they have superhero names or supervillain names, so it's super confusing, like 24/7. I don't fucking know who's who anymore. Like, sometimes I know their hero name, sometimes I only know their real name. It's a pain in the ass, is what I'm trying to say. But in arc 3, we meet the wards, which consist of characters like Clock Blocker and Vista and Kid Win and, you know, people like that. We also meet Glory Girl and Panacea, aka Amy. I'm going to call Panacea Amy because that's just what I called her the whole time. So we just meet all these hero characters as Taylor robs the bank. Like I said, it's a fun little bank robbery. This is really the first time you kind of get like foundations for the undersiders characters. You know, Regent likes to fuck around, or Alec. I'm going to call them their superhero names. It's just easier. Regent likes to fuck around and kind of screw around, tell jokes, ruin the mission. Gru is like way too serious 24/7. Bitch does not understand social cues. And Tattletale, you get the sense that Tattletale has some ulterior motives here, that she's the only one in contact with their boss, the Undersiders boss, and you kind of get the sense, I don't know, you're not, in my opinion, you're not fully supposed to trust Tattletale here in these early arcs. It's a little iffy on whether or not she's one of the good ones. But after the bank heist, the next 2 arcs kind of consist of more world building, you know, setting up like Taylor's school life more and how fucking abysmal that is, with Sophia and Emma just ruining her life. And then the superhero side of it has them pretty much have a gang war with the Asian bad boys because Taylor took out their leader, so now the Asian bad boys gotta retaliate. And this is where we meet characters like Bakuda, who's a tinkerer. All the superhero types have like classifications. I don't really remember most of them, but I do remember tinkerer because they say it a lot. And that's basically like an Iron Man, right? A tinkerer is a smart person who can build things. and Bakuda specializes in bombs. Varying degrees of bombs. Like she can make a bomb that stops time for a little bit. This is just the beginning, by the way. There are 30 arcs, and this is arc 4 and 5. Okay? There's already characters who can stop time. There's already mind control. Worm is insane, is what I'm trying to sell to you, viewers. It's fucking crazy. Typically, when you read like a superhero story, let's use Invincible, for example. Invincible starts kind of crazy, but then it gradually gets crazier and crazier. Not Worm. Worm is crazy and stays crazy. 100%. You could say it gets more crazier, but it doesn't even feel like an evolution. It just feels like that's how crazy it's always been. So that's what's going on in Worm. This shit's crazy. We got fucking bombs that can stop time. We got the Endbringers, which I will touch on later. It's insane. But that's really what the first chunk of arcs are. They take down Bakuda and a good little bit of the Asian bad boys at the cost of the city, because Bakuda planted an ass ton of bombs around the city and just basically code reds the city, just blows half of Brockton Bay up, which is the start of Brockton Bay's very unfortunate existence in the story of Worm. It is not great for this town. I'd rather live in Gotham. So, I've briefly mentioned in this video so far that I don't really want to do like a full recap, rundown of the plot. Hell, actually, I don't even know if I mentioned that. This video has been rough. Not to interrupt me talking about Worm, but I really have no idea how I want to frame this video, because I don't want to talk about every plot point of Worm, because Worm is super fucking long, and I don't have time to do that, and I took extensive notes on Worm, which I have never done reading a book before in my life, and I did that because I knew I was going to make this video. And there's so much to Worm that it's like insane, and there's too many characters, which I'll get into that point later. But what I'm trying to say is, if this video is structured very weirdly, it's because I'm recording bits and pieces of it like days after each other, which I apologize for if it is structured very weirdly. And I also just don't want to do like a full plot recap. That's not what I'm here to do. I just want to talk about it like a review, and kind of, if people are still watching this video and you haven't read Worm, try to, shove you into the fandom, get you into Worm, or Parahumans as the franchise itself is called. So if this video is structured very weirdly, that is why. That being said, the next little bit of Worm we have, I briefly mentioned Bakuda, who is a member of the Asian Bad Boys, in the last little section. So after she detonates like dozens of bombs across Brockton Bay, Lung gets out of prison. Now Lung, I also briefly mentioned, is the leader of the Asian Bad Boys, and the first person Taylor, our main character, sort of fought as a hero, we'll say. So Lung gets out of prison, and the undersiders have a little gang war with the ABB. And this is where we meet like Oni Lee, who is Lung's other second in command outside of Bakuda, and he can like teleport, and when he teleports he has like clones. It's all very interesting. Worm powers, as I have mentioned, are extremely unique and one of the best things about it. However, this, I believe, is the start, in my opinion, the start of my biggest problem with Worm. And that is, there are too many fucking characters in this story, okay? I'm not even really going to talk about the plot here right now. I'll briefly get to that. There are too many characters in this. And, you're probably thinking, if you watch videos on this channel or you know me, well, that doesn't make any sense, Xander. You like the Wheel of Time. Your favorite thing ever is the Wheel of Time, and there's a gajillion characters in the Wheel of Time. That's true. There are. The big difference and the big problem I have with Worm is you don't get POV chapters from the other characters, right? For, I'd say about 98% of Worm, outside of the interludes, it's all Taylor's perspective, which I understand it's about Taylor. But the problem is this world is so, at least in my opinion, is so fucking massive, and there's constantly things changing and shifting with characters. Not only like, you know, let's say, I'm trying to think of an example early on here that doesn't like delve later, but you'll just have a moment where, to make up like a fake example in Worm, you'll get a moment in an interlude, right? Because there are interludes, and the interludes are about different characters that aren't Taylor. But you'll get a moment in an interlude where one of the characters you're reading about is like, okay, this is the thing I want to do. I want to do this. I'm going to go do this. Like, let's say they're like, I'm going to go join the wards. I want to go join a superhero team. And then the next time you see that character from Taylor's perspective, they're a villain, and they're like cutting off people's arms because they've gone insane. And then like that's just how Worm is. And like, it doesn't wholly detract from the story, but it definitely detracts from the characters as a whole, and it kind of makes it hard to get attached to characters outside of the undersiders and like Taylor, because either A, you'll meet a character, you'll get a couple chapters with said character. Now, it won't be from their perspective, but they'll be around for a couple chapters, and then they'll disappear for 20 chapters. Or you'll get a character for 2 chapters, they'll be really interesting, and then the next time they show up, they're essentially a different character because they've gone on a whole-ass character arc worthy of, like, 7 books, basically. Which is, like, my biggest problem with Worm, because it's hard to get attached to characters when shit like that happens, and I really wish there were either more interludes or like more chapters from, and I know Worm's already long and I'm asking for it to be longer, but I wish there were more chapters from other characters' perspectives, because like, goddamn, you know. And Taylor's a good protagonist. My problem isn't like, oh, I don't want to read from Taylor's perspective, although that is slightly a problem I have. I like Taylor a lot, but this is the start for me of kind of disliking the beginning of Taylor, because it's this section we're at here with the Lung and the Oni Lee fight, and basically the Asian bad boy gang wars, we'll call it. Taylor is currently on the undersiders, and she's pretending to be like a double agent for the good guys, right? She wants to get all these information so she can give it back to the good guys. But she is like, for instance, with Lung, she cuts Lung's eyes out. Now, Lung has regeneration, so he'll be fine. But she cuts his eyes out and then, like, tortures people and brutally maims people, and she's like, I'm a good guy. Oh yeah, I'm a good guy. Like, every chapter she's like, I'm a good guy. I'm one of these days I'm going to tell Armsmaster, and I'm going to tell the Protectorate, and everything's going to be fine. I'm a good guy. And I understand she's gone on a character arc. I get that. But it's just very annoying, in my opinion. Like, you're gaslighting yourself, Taylor. You just cut a man's eyes out. You're filled with anger. This is not good guy behaviors. You don't see Spider-Man ripping a dude's eyeballs out. That's not what they do. And it just kind of gets annoying. Taylor does get better when she kind of fully accepts later down the road that maybe she's not a good guy. But it takes a fucking long time to get there. But that being said, as I mentioned, she cuts Lung's eyes out, and they beat the shit out of Oni Lee, and that's really the end of this. This is also when we meet the Travelers and Coil. We find out Coil is their boss, the Undersiders' boss, as well as the Travelers' boss. And there's like 7 Travelers, so yet again, the point mentioning them is there are more characters. At this point in the story, we have to remember Taylor, Emma, and Sophia, which are her bullies. Taylor's dad, Danny, which we actually don't really have to remember him anymore because Taylor, a 15-year-old child, decides to just up and leave her house and become a full-time undersider. But Danny's still important, but like for now, we can kind of forget he's there. So we got Taylor, Emma, Sophia, all the undersiders, which is Bitch, Tattletale, Gru, and Regent. We need to remember Coil. We need to remember the ABB, which is Bakuda, Lung, Oni Lee. The Wards, which is too many characters. The Protectorate, which again is too many characters. New Wave, which is another superhero team that's going on. The Travelers, which again is like another 7 characters. We'll never get POV. Well, I don't want to say we'll never get POV chapters from their perspective, because that's not true. But like for the most part, we don't. We're never really gonna learn how they work. And there's a lot of fucking characters, is my point. So that's my biggest problem with Worm, and that's kind of the coverage of chapters 5 to 7, give or take, right along there. So we're in the next little segment here. We're gonna hit the 8 to 10 range, which is when Worm starts to get fucked up. It's already fucked up, but trust me when I say this, it gets more fucked up. So let's get on into it. So as mentioned, this is where Worm gets fucked up. So coming off the fight with the Asian bad boys, immediately Coil leaks the information of the Empire 88, which is essentially a group of racist Nazis living in Brockton Bay. As mentioned, this city fucking blows. This city sucks ass. Do not live in this city. But Coil, just out of nowhere, leaks their information, and by that I mean he puts their public identities into the public, right? So now everyone knows who these racist Nazis are, which causes the racist Nazis to declare war on the undersiders, which, much like the Asian bad boys, has our characters fighting a cacophony of other characters. You know, you got characters like Hookwolf and Cricket and Kaiser is the leader of the Empire 88. They all have really cool powers. Like Kaiser creates like metal knives out of the ground. You know, he can like control metal, sort of like Magneto, but not fully to the Magneto extent. And Hookwolf can like make his body knives. Like, there's cool powers here, right? Is what I'm trying to say. But we learn that through fighting the Empire 88, whatever, that Coil, during the bank robbery the undersiders pulled, kidnapped a little girl named Dinah. Now this little girl, he has kidnapped and basically hooked her up to drugs because she has a superpower to see the future. Sort of. It's a different way of seeing, like, she doesn't directly see the future, but she can see like outcomes and then the probability of those outcomes. So like, she could see, like, if you asked her, what's the probability of me, you know, stubbing my toe later? And she'd be like, 72.5%, right? That's her power. So we learn Coil kidnapped this girl, which introduces some tension into the undersiders, because at this point Taylor has pretty much fully decided to finally be a villain. But she still kind of has, like, good in her. Yeah, she'll cut a dude's eyes out. Like, not a problem, right? She's gonna cut Lung's eyeballs out. But this little girl's been kidnapped and hooked up to drugs, and she has a real problem with that, which I'm making fun of her. But, like, yeah, I have a problem with that, too. Like, obviously, save this little girl. Especially, the thing that weighs on her is the fact that their bank robbery allowed, like, cover for them for other villains to kidnap Dinah for Coil. So, like, it is sort of directly their fault, and that's how Taylor sees it. I mean, it isn't directly their fault, but, you know, Taylor feels it is. So she kind of toys with leaving the undersiders, and she doesn't really know what she's planning to do, because as she's trying to figure it all out, the very first Endbringer shows up. An Endbringer named Leviathan. Now, I briefly have touched on them, but what an Endbringer is essentially a kaiju. Think Godzilla, right? But unlike Godzilla, where in most Godzilla stories, Godzilla is like a man-made horror that man-made with like a nuclear bomb, to, most Godzilla movies are kind of like, here's a metaphor, right? Wow, I lost that. That was bad. Okay, Now, Endbringers I have briefly touched on. Ignore the cut there. I'm not going to explain why there was a cut there. But an Endbringer is essentially, think Godzilla, right? It's a big kaiju monster. The only difference is these things are just like a force of nature. There's no thought behind them. There's no, they weren't man-made. They just exist. and nobody really knows why they exist or how they exist. It's unexplained, right? But Taylor's in the middle of trying to figure life out when Leviathan shows up. Now, Leviathan is this chonky sea Endbringer, so he can control water, but he also has like an after image thing, which, reading it the first time, I was pretty confused because I thought he would just be able to control water, but like he moves like he looks like the boss from Sonic. I'm gonna throw photos on. I don't remember the boss's name, but that's kind of how I imagined him looking like and how his powers looked like. I'll also throw Leviathan art on screen. But regardless, Leviathan shows up, and this is the first time a big truce happens. So we get a truce between the Empire 88 and the Undersiders. We get a truce between them and the heroes. Like, everyone comes together, heroes, villains alike, to fight this Endbringer, because these things don't fuck around. This is also where we get our first introduction to a hero named Dragon, who I will get into more in a little bit. But Dragon's very important. Dragon is like the best tinkerer in the world. She is the smartest person on the planet. And she's made these little like armbands that you like type in your ID, and then it'll say if you're alive or not, and you can communicate through the armbands and say like, hey, I need, there's civilians here, we need, medics here, that kind of situation. So all the heroes show up, all the Undersiders, all the villains, and you quickly realize none of it matters. Nothing matters, because the Endbringers don't fuck around. Like, they're throwing the strongest of the strongest at Leviathan, and it does not matter. So Taylor realizes, like, she's just gonna help people. Get some medic evacs, get any heroes that need, like, assistance, she's gonna help them. It does not go well for her. Immediately, she witnesses multiple people die, leaves a couple other people to die. It is, like, abysmally bad. It is the worst situation you could possibly put yourself into, especially being a superhero or supervillain who's only been doing it for like 2 weeks. Not a good thing for Taylor. But all of it, eventually, her just like running through the battlefield trying to save as many people as possible, leads her to where Leviathan is, but also Armsmaster is there. Now, as I mentioned before, Armsmaster was the hero that sort of talked to Taylor on her first night out, and Armsmaster was kind of an asshole. They've had a couple meetings. Armsmaster in each and every one is kind of an asshole. But Taylor's a little confused, though, right? Because she runs into Armsmaster and she runs into Leviathan. But Leviathan just kind of, like, showed up. And the armband, all of a sudden, like, her armband disables. But before it disables, it, like, counts a numerous amount of dead heroes. A lot of them being, like, wards that we had met before, or briefly had met before. Kaiser, the leader of the Empire 88, gets torn in half by Leviathan. Taylor actually sees that part. But then Armsmaster is here, and his device is kind of a little wonky too, but he's got this weird, like, plasma looking spear, because he uses kind of like lances and spears, and he starts cutting Leviathan, which, like, nobody else has been able to do, right? Turns out he made a weapon that could, like, cut molecules, and he starts using it to fuck Leviathan up. And then he sees, like, Taylor, and he kind of freaks out because, like, her armband declared her dead because it started acting wonky, which is where we find out that Armsmaster did a thing with the armbands that would drag Leviathan to him. So he basically killed all, like, when he set off this weird EMP thing, killing a good chunk of people. Like, technically Kaiser's on him, a couple of the wards are on him, some heroes are on him, but he doesn't really care because Armsmaster is sort of insane. He's a good guy. It's not like he's a bad guy, but he just wants power. He wants to be recognized as, like, the number one guy, because that's what he thinks he is. So this is really a lesson in humility when he starts to cut Leviathan. And while it's cool, he then starts to gloat and monologue. Like, why? I get it. He wants to be the number one dog. It makes sense for his character. But, like, dude, you've got an Endbringer on its knees. He cuts its arm off. Like, he's got an Endbringer here. He's winning. And he just starts to gloat about how he's the best guy on the world, or in the world, and how he's gonna win. He's gonna be the first one to kill an Endbringer. Well, Leviathan smacks him and like breaks all of his bones and rips his arm off as well just to fuck with him, and then just sort of tosses him like a limp rag, and then leaves. Leviathan goes, "Okay, sick. I got fucked up." So he like retreats. He fights people on the way out, but he's mainly retreating right now. So that's like the first encounter with an Endbringer. There's not much more to it. The last thing that does happen is Leviathan just run into one of the like shelters. So Taylor tries to save some people, and then Leviathan like smacks her away and shatters her spine. So Taylor becomes crippled, which we'll get into in the next section. But that's what an Endbringer is. That's what they do. And we also learn that Leviathan is maybe the weakest of them. The debate, a couple times throughout the series, they kind of debate which of the strongest is. So there's Leviathan, there's Behemoth, and then there's Simurgh. Simurgh is a weird name, I don't know. It also, like, doesn't line up with the other two. The other two are, like, simple kaiju names, and then Simurgh is, like, some wacky shit, which makes sense for Simurgh's character, so we'll get to that. But Leviathan is maybe the weakest, and he essentially destroyed Brockton Bay. I mean, the city isn't, like, inherently destroyed. It doesn't look like, a Zack Snyder city. But it doesn't look great after, like, the 2 gang wars and then an Endbringer attacking. But I guess from the hero's perspective, it's a big win because as they established throughout the series, Japan and mainly Newfoundland just don't exist anymore. The Endbringers completely have fucking essentially wiped them off the map. So that's the power of an Endbringer. That's what this universe is dealing with. That's how fucked the Worm universe is, or the Parahumans universe, which is why I would never, ever, ever, ever in a million years want to live in this universe. I would rather live in the Marvel and DC universes, and those things get fucked up every day of the week too. This shit sucks ass. And it's about to get worse for the simple town of Brockton Bay. So let's get on into that. So, before it can get better, it gets worse, right? It doesn't get better in Worm. I don't think ever. So I lied right there. That's just a bold-faced lie. But what happens next after the Endbringers is sort of little couple chapters that I call the Leviathan wrap-up, or what I will be calling, where Taylor, with her broken spine, convinces Amy to heal her. So basically all of Taylor's injuries go away because Amy is like that OP of a healer, which is nice. I didn't expect Taylor to be crippled the whole time, and there's, healers in multiple dimensions and shit, so that's fine. But the little aftermath of that is we find out Shadowstalker, who is a sort of deranged vigilante working for the government, because she would rather work for the government than go to prison, is Sophia, Taylor's like bully at school, which kind of like fucks with Taylor's head. It kind of gets rid of any of her last dreams of ever being a hero, because she's sort of like, if people like Armsmaster and Sophia can be heroes, then like what the fuck are even heroes, right? Like what even do they do? So she sort of decides to stick it with the undersiders. That's like, I think, the final nail in the coffin. But the heroes have a different idea. The heroes are kind of like, listen, you're in a hospital. Like, yes, you're healed, but we're not just going to let a notorious villain, who I forgot to mention, has taken over the docks area of Brockton Bay, because that was Coil's plan, is to like take over segments of the city. So she owns a part of the city, like some kingpin type shit. So the heroes are like, we're not going to let you leave. Going so far as to Armsmaster reveals her secret that she was like an undercover hero, sort of, to the undersiders, which kind of like ruins their relationship. But then Taylor just runs away. Taylor freaks out, runs away. And we cut to like 2 weeks later, where we see her make a decision with Tattletale / Lisa kind of shows up and is like, hey, listen, let's talk about this, like what's going on. And Taylor decides to stick it with the undersiders because she wants to rescue Dinah, and if that's like the last thing she does not give a shit. So that's the sort of goal going forward. I think these first, 8-ish arcs sort of establish the characters. You get the world. You kind of understand the things that are going on. Everything after 8, though, in my opinion, is sort of where Worm truly begins, I think. This has been extended prologue, basically, because everything after this is one plot, which we'll get to, but it's one plot building on top of each other, whereas this is sort of the stepping stones for that plot to be built, if that makes any sense. If not, apologies if you heard my phone vibrate right there. Thought I turned it on silent, did not. But Taylor decides to stay with the undersiders and rescue Dinah. The rest of the undersiders are kind of mad at her, but they go with it because they also kind of a couple of them, like Bitch and Regent, don't really care about Dinah, but they don't really like Coil either, and they would rather just rule the city instead of ruling the city under Coil. And then Tattletale and Gru are kind of with Taylor, where they're like, yeah, keeping an 11-year-old child hooked up on drugs in the den of a supervillain is sort of fucked up, so they don't want to do that. So that's sort of where this prologue-ish, what I will call the prologue of Worm, sort of leaves us with. But then we get an interlude, which I haven't really talked about many of the interludes, because while they are important and very fun to read, because you get to see a new character and a new character's perspective, most of them, not most of them, but the early ones don't really affect the story. Like, for instance, you get a Ward interlude, or a Glory Girl and Amy interlude before they show up in the bank robbery. So you kind of know who these characters are, and then boom, they show up in the bank robbery. Like, that's kind of what the early interludes do. But past this point, the interludes become, sort of super fucking important. For instance, we get a Coil interlude from Coil's perspective, where we learn what his power is. And Coil has a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure power, because he can snap his finger. He doesn't even have to snap his finger, but he can essentially snap his finger and create an alternate world. So he can see these two worlds at the same time. And then he can, let's say in world A, he shoots you, right? Let's say Coil's talking to you, he's having a business meeting with you. In world A, he'll shoot you, kill you, and see how that goes. In world B, he'll work with you. Now, whichever world gives him the favorable outcome, he'll close the other one and then stay in that world. And Tattletale and Taylor know this, because Tattletale figured it out with her kind of psychic power, and she told Taylor, but they didn't tell the rest of the undersiders, because learning that kind of defeats morale. It's kind of fucked up to learn the guy you're trying to beat can create and see into multiple worlds. Now, I don't think he can see into more than 2. I'm pretty sure he can only see into 2, but this is the only time you get a POV from Coil, so I don't really remember. It's also been a month since I first started reading Worm, so forgive me, and my notes, while extensive, are not that extensive. But that is, this is a good little first part. This is where I was going to end when I wanted to make this a trilogy of videos, this is where I was going to end it. So if you're still here and my very terrible recap has interested you, leave now, go read Worm, because you still have 20 plus chapters you can read. If you don't care and you just want to hear how the rest of the story goes, stick around and find out. What's next for everyone's favorite bug lady after fighting kaijus and declaring war on a crime lord, you ask? Fighting a creepypasta. But not just one creepypasta, nay, a team of creepypastas. That's right, we're talking about the Slaughterhouse Nine. Now, the best way to pitch the Slaughterhouse Nine to someone who has never read Worm before would be, I suppose, to say, imagine a team of Joker, okay? Imagine if 9 Jokers got together, but they're not just Joker. They all have different mental issues and different, very OP superpowers. Then you have the Slaughterhouse Nine. Now, to set up the Slaughterhouse Nine coming to Brockton Bay, yet another glorious incident for this fantastic city Rent must cost $5, and if it's any more than that, this city is not fucking worth it. Regardless, to introduce them, Wildbow does a group of interludes, 9 interludes, to sort of show what they're all about, show their powers, show their personalities, and introduce them, right? So for starters, we have Siberian. I will throw photos up, by the way. So the photo you are seeing now will probably be Siberian, and henceforth when we, keep going with the other members. So the first one we get is Siberian. And in this very first interlude, we learn that the Slaughterhouse Nine are attempting to recruit people. And then Siberian wants to recruit Bitch, or Rachel, a member of the Undersiders. And just kind of, juice her up. She gives Bitch a wolf pup, which will come in handy later, and I will talk about later. But keep that in your little noggins. The next one we meet is Jack Slash, who, unfortunately, despite being the most fucked up and the leader of the group, all of the fan art makes him look like the Onceler, and by that I mean a Tumblr sexy man. I can't do anything about that, so I apologize. But regardless, Jack Slash, I'll get into their powers later when they become necessary. But for now, we catch back up with a character named Purity, who I don't think I mentioned, but she was dating Kaiser, the leader of the Nazis, right? Kaiser's obviously now dead. Purity is alive and kind of trying to do her own thing. And her stepson, so Kaiser's son, Theo, is under attack by Jack Slash. And Jack Slash is prepared to kill Theo and then Purity's other child, right as Purity walks in the door. But Theo kind of convinces him to sort of come back. So Jack Slash gives Theo 2 years before he's going to come back to Brockton Bay and kill Theo. And if Theo, or try to fight Theo, essentially. And if Theo can't win, he's basically going to wipe the city off the map. So that kind of sets up a big plot line. This one is probably the most important of the setup. One, because as I said, Jack Slash is the leader of the group, and also because Theo will eventually become extremely important, so I have to mention him, and we will get back to him later. We then meet Burns Scar, who I believe interrupts a member of the Merchants, who the Merchants is like an evil criminal gang. Doesn't matter. They don't really matter. Burns Scar doesn't really matter. I'm just mentioning her now because I have to. We meet Mannequin, who attempts to recruit Arms Master, who was arrested due to him kind of murdering a bunch of heroes and doing bad things with Leviathan. And we learn Mannequin's whole deal is he was in Newfoundland when it was destroyed, and he's a tinkerer, and his wife and daughter were murdered. So he's kind of gone insane and just decided to murder people, but he also made himself like a robot, as evidenced by the photos on screen. So he's kind of like a creepy robot man. And we learn from Dragon that he likes to go after people he thinks that he can sort of break and make become like him. So that's kind of what he's doing with Arms Master. And he sort of fucks Arms Master up, but then just leaves like right before he kills him. Because they're not supposed to kill him. They're trying to kind of recruit them. So that's Mannequin. We meet, who's next? We meet Shatterstar, who can, she, sings and then it vibrates and breaks all the glass in the area. And by area, I mean she can do it across an entire city's length, which, is very clearly Wildbow setting up that poor Brockton Bay ain't gonna make it another goddamn week. Rent is about to go to $150 from the $5 it already is. We meet Crawler, who is trying to recruit Noelle, and this is kind of not the first time we're mentioned of Noelle, but the first time I've mentioned Noelle. So Noelle is a member of Trickster's gang that all we know about is she's in a bunker in Coil's base, and that's kind of the reason Trickster and his gang are working with Coil, because something is wrong with Noelle, but we don't really know what right now, and we'll get to that later. But Crawler's whole deal is he just wants to evolve. Like, his power allows him to evolve, but he's at the point where he doesn't really feel pain. So, like, if you went up to Crawler and you promised you could make him feel pain, he would genuinely just sit down and let you do it to see if it works. So that's that guy. That's what they're dealing with. Then we meet Cherish, who is Regent's sister. She's also kind of got mind powers, but she kind of controls them through, like, emotions. Very creepy and disgusting. This is also, I guess this is the first opportunity for me to mention Regent's dad, Heartbreaker, who is, like, an extremely evil guy who lives in Canada that emotionally and physically abuses his children and other people. And Regent and Cherish are, like, the two of his 20-something kids that have kind of left. And Cherish kind of threatens to tell Heartbreaker that Regent is here in Brockton Bay if he doesn't sort of play along with the Slaughterhouse Nine's game. So, we kind of got some stakes here. Like, they can't just leave the city or they're going to get fucked, right? And then the last one we meet is Bonesaw, who's trying to recruit Amy, or Panacea, I think, or Pansea. I don't remember her superhero name. I always just call her Amy. And Bonesaw is a tinkerer who makes really fucked up creations. Like, she'll shove two people together into one, like, robot, but she'll keep them alive so they can still feel pain and think, but they have to, like, obey all her commands. An extremely fucked up character that we'll get into later. But this is probably the most important interlude outside of the Theo one, because Amy ends up running away from her house, and her sister Glory Girl shows up. Now, what we know about Amy, and I didn't mention this before, but she's adopted, and her father is a supervillain, so Amy is kind of afraid of becoming like her father and being a supervillain. And I think I mentioned, maybe I haven't, Amy's superpower is she's a healer, so she can basically heal anything, including mental trauma, but she refuses to touch people's brains because she's afraid that doing so will make her like her father and she'll become evil. So by accident, at the end of this chapter, she touches her sister Glory Girl and makes Glory Girl fall in love with her, like, uncontrollably in love with her, because as it turns out, Amy has, like, a crush on her adoptive sister, which, if you're thinking is very weird, don't worry. Glory Girl thinks the same thing and immediately runs away in anger and hatred, and because she, like, is in love with her sister now, so she's fucking creeped out. It's really weird and disgusting that it happened. And we'll talk more about Amy later, but that's sort of the Slaughterhouse Nine. That's the introduction I wanted to give. So why don't we get right on in to this city's rent getting lower. So after that interlude, we get right back into the fold with Taylor. This is sort of where we learn the stuff I briefly mentioned earlier, where, she wants to fight Coil. The undersiders have taken her back in, but they are mad that she joined them as a hero to, like, betray them, and they're mad because it's kind of a breach of trust, so she has to rebuild those friendships. And she wants to take on Coil. They don't know anything about the Nine coming to town, by the way. They don't know their rent's about to get lower, as I put it. So they just kind of start doing shit under Coil's thumb, because he wants them to rule the city. So Taylor starts trying to earn some money. She recruits some people because she took over the docks, so she wants to make the docks a lot better and, like, livable again after the Leviathan attack. So she, is recruiting people, she's feeding people, she's, giving medical attention to people. They're all doing very nice things. And then all the villains call a little meeting, and including some of the heroes as well. They all call a meeting because at this point, the high players have learned the Slaughterhouse Nine are coming to town. So they all call a meeting to call a truce so they can, deal with the creepypasta team of serial killers. However, in the middle of said truce, they sort of kick the undersiders and the travelers out because they don't trust them, because the Slaughterhouse Nine tried to recruit members of them, and some other reasons, like they just never liked him anyways because they were in gang wars and stuff, and they have opposing ideals, as well as the fact that the undersiders and the travelers have already, from the view of like everyone else, have been working together, because out of nowhere they've all just taken chunks of the city under their own, and nobody knows they're working for Coil, and Coil is at the meeting, and people just think Coil is kind of like his own entity. So because of those reasons, they sort of kick the undersiders and the travelers out, which caused the undersiders and the travelers to be like, okay, well, the Slaughterhouse Nine are coming for us, so maybe we should work together. And this is where we get a lot of the travelers, but I'll get into the team later because they become much more important later. So that's sort of the setup. That's the beginning of the... sorry, I had to yawn. That's the beginning of the end of the current status quo, because the Slaughterhouse Nine have come to town. And what they do when they come to town is immediately have Shatterstar, or Shatterbird, I already forgot her name, I feel bad, just explode the entirety of the glass in the city. What a great way to announce that you're there. And that's not me being sarcastic. If you're an evil supervillain, just blow the entire city up. And there you go. Also, the rent has now gone down from $5 to $150 a month. Because goddamn, the city doesn't even have glass anymore. And you can't even get shipments of glass because Shatterstar will just... Or Shatterbird, I think it's Shatterbird. Shatterbird will just blow it all the fuck up. Wonderful. Wonderful times in Brockton Bay. I just love reading about this city. And this is also where they kind of meet up with the Nine, because the way the Nine recruit is one member of the Nine picks a person they want to recruit, and then they go around, the other members go around and test them. So people like Regent and Bitch have to, they're like primary targets of the Nine, and they have to deal with the Nine. And because of that, when the Undersiders eventually end up meeting with the Nine, Tattletale challenges them to a game of sorts. If you can kill, or not kill, but I think it is actually, if you can kill the people you recruited, if you kill enough of them, then you could take the city. But if we recruit enough of them and keep them alive to a certain point, then you have to leave without killing anybody. And this is kind of where we learn that Jack Slash, the leader, is sort of bored. You can kind of tell he's just doing this because it's what he knows, and he looks for these sort of challenges. So he immediately accepts. And now the game is afoot, and all the characters have to do what is kind of like a shonen tournament arc against a bunch of creepypastas. So let's get right into that. So here's the thing about the creepypasta team. As mentioned, they are extremely fucked up. And we do see some of that with characters like Bonesaw, and just the idea of Mannequin and stuff. But we see a lot more of it upcoming. Maybe the most brutal thing I have ever read in my entire life. And that's saying a lot. This channel is about me reviewing books. I read I'm stalling is what I'm doing, because what happens after they accept the challenge? Well, Taylor goes home to her docks, and Mannequin is there. So she has to fight Mannequin, and it's very brutal. He's this robot guy, so she's got to get silk in between his joints. He kills a bunch of civilians, her civilians. But she does end up beating him off, and he kind of runs away like a little bitch. Some of the civilians do help her, so it's not solely her, but regardless, this is kind of the start for Taylor, at least, of people liking her, and the civilians in the dock area kind of being
oh, she likes us. Like, she'll stand up for us. She'll actively possibly die just to save us. So people kind of start to like her. And then this is when, after that, the next day is when the games begin. Now, I forgot to add, the little caveat of the games is, of the 9 players, the 9 potential recruits, or it might be 8 potential recruits, doesn't matter. Of the potential recruits, they are not allowed to leave Brockton Bay. And if they do leave Brockton Bay, then the 9 will, Bonesaw will unleash something. They don't really say what she has that she'll unleash, but all we know about it is it will destroy the city. Not like potentially destroy the city. No, it will destroy the city. And with everything we've not only seen in Worm, but also from the Slaughterhouse Nine, you believe it. And to add to this, so you already have the tension of these games and having to fight the most dangerous criminals on the planet. To add to this, Dinah gets a vision that she tells Coil, and then Coil tells the rest of the team, that if Jack Slash makes it out alive of Brockton Bay, the world will end in 2 years. Which, if you remember, is the exact time that Jack gave Theo to sort of get stronger before he comes back to Brockton Bay. So, as I mentioned before, this is kind of, I believe this is the true, like, after the Leviathan and this is kind of like the true start of Worm, because you get the full plot. You get the Slaughterhouse Nine, who become like the main villains, sort of, and you get the end of the world in 2 years plot, which is, this is the spoiler section, we'll get to it, but that's how the story ends. I won't say if they do kill Jack Slash or not right now, but, it's the end of the world is a very important factor in everything going forward, which is probably what makes this little Slaughterhouse 9 chapter my favorite part of Worm. I don't know why, but just Slaughterhouse 9 themselves are so unique. They're so different from each other and other villains so far that I love them. And their powers are really unique, and like the way the heroes, I say heroes, but the way our villains have to fight these villains is very unique. It's all great, and the stakes are there because they're doing like the most fucked up shit. They're working with like the travelers to like grab one of them but then leave another, and they're just playing mind games with the Slaughterhouse Nine, sort of trying to get out, or get one of them, kill them, like shank them in an alley and then leave their corpse somewhere. It doesn't really work. But the big important steps that happen here is Gru's sister, Aisha, she triggered sometime during the Leviathan event. It happens off screen, I'm pretty sure. And she becomes Imp. So I'll refer to her as Imp from now. And her power is weird, but it's basically like when she turns it on, or it's always on, so she has to turn it off. But while it is always on, nobody can see her, and they kind of like forget she's even there. So frequently throughout the rest of the series, Imp will make like a funny wisecrack, and then people will be like, oh, what the fuck? Like, they'll freak out because their brains completely forgot she was there. So that's what Imp does. Imp has the fantastic idea. She's important because she has the idea of getting captured by the Slaughterhouse Nine, and that's not what she intended, but she thought it'd be a good idea to sneak in and kill Bonesaw while they were sleeping. But, Bonesaw's like a cybernetic person, so she has counteracting, like, she could counteract Imp's power, so it doesn't work. Imp gets captured. At the same time, Gru gets captured. And this is what I said by, like, holy shit, stakes, right? Like, now it's getting crazy. Like, they gotta go rescue Imp, they gotta go rescue Gru. Also, the Slaughterhouse Nine are beating their ass because Siberian, who I briefly mentioned, is, as we find out, more powerful than the top 3 of the Protectorate, which is Alexandria, Legend, and Eidolon. She's more powerful than all of them, and those 3 can go toe-to-toe with an Endbringer by themselves. And Siberian is more powerful or as powerful as them. So the Slaughterhouse Nine is packing bucket heat, is what I'm trying to say. And then we get to the most fucked up thing, maybe I have ever read. They all break into the Slaughterhouse Nine's base because they have to go rescue Gru and Imp. And when they get there, poor Brian, or Gru, is strung up on the wall, chest open so you can see his internal organs, head open so you can see his brain, and his nerve endings have been ripped out of his body and extended all throughout the wall, the ceiling, and the floor. So the room he is in, which is like a freezer, when the undersiders or Taylor step in there, they are stepping on his nerve endings, which cause Gru to freak out, rightfully so, because people are stepping on him. So that's what happens with Gru, everybody. That's probably the most fucked up thing I've ever read. I don't think I can think of a more fucked up thing than that. And even describing it and, like, seeing it in my head, I'm like, you know? But it gets worse, because at that moment, Bonesaw comes in, knocks all of the undersiders unconscious, grabs Taylor, starts to bonesaw into her fucking skull just to see what her brain looks like, before she is stopped by Pariah, whose character has been mentioned a couple times, who can, like, Pariah can make really big, like, Macy Day Parade floaties, you know, and use them to, like, fight people. Pariah's chill, but she is only there to stop Bonesaw because Bonesaw kidnapped a bunch of Pariah's people and then gave them plastic surgery, so now they all look like the Slaughterhouse Nine. So that's what's going on there. And then, unfortunately, Bonesaw beats the shit out of Pariah, says, "I'll come back to you later," is about to Bonesaw Taylor's skull off. And then at this moment, Brian has a second trigger, which is a thing they've kind of mentioned, but they haven't really mentioned. So it's basically, I mean, it is, you know, it's a pretty simple term. You trigger your first time, you get your superpower. You trigger again, your superpower gets, like, cooler. But I do want to mention, this is one of the first times we, like, seen a trigger. When a trigger happens, you get these visions of, like, gods from another universe, like, fucking and then giving birth and, like, existing, and it's really weird, but then you immediately forget about it afterwards. But we, as the viewer, get to see it. So it's very interesting, and that will come back later. But I just needed to mention that because that needed to be out there, and it's a mystery throughout the entirety of the series, basically, until the very end. But that's this chapter of the Slaughterhouse Nine. They end up beating them. They almost kill Bonesaw, but they have to, like, leave just to survive, because then the rest of the Slaughterhouse Nine showed up. So then they just kind of fucking run away. And from this point on, I think this is chapter 13 of 30. And from this point on, Brian is done. I mean, Gru, whatever. And he's not fully done. Like, he'll still do things, but he is a different man after this. And he never recovers. Taylor kind of gets over her little Bonesaw incident, but Brian, rightfully so, by the way, I'm not dissing on Brian, absolutely. He never gets over it, and is kind of catatonic for a good couple of chapters. So, I don't really know how to bookend this little segment. It's dark and creepy, so let's get right on into the next Slaughterhouse 9 encounter. So, chapter 14 is what we're on, and it is the wrap-up of the Slaughterhouse 9. They have all gotten, or I don't know if they're chapters, they're like arcs with chapters in them. They've all gotten very long now. Rightfully so. It's a big story. But after the Gru incident, they decide to go and save Amy, because she is on her own, and she's one of the recruits, so they need to protect her. And to save Amy, they have to deal with Siberian, who, as previously mentioned, is as close to a god as a human can get in this universe. But they do learn that Siberian actually has a body, and the one we normally see, pictures on screen, is a projection. So their thought is if they can deal with the body, they can win. But before that happens, Siberian likes to play a little game of chase with its victims, and she bites like 5 of Amy's fingers off, which is fucked up. I hate Amy, by the way. I mean, look, sorry for her fingers, but she mind raped her sister, constantly shits on Taylor for just kind of being a bad guy, and then thinks she has like the moral high ground. I don't like Amy. She does not get a redemption, in my opinion, ever, and we'll get to her later, but they do try to save Amy, and the most she does for them before leaving again, we'll get to that, but she gives Taylor radar bugs. Like, Amy morphs some bugs into like more like satellite senses, so because Taylor has a limit of where her bug powers are, so now if she uses these bugs, they act as like a satellite dish, so she can control more bugs. And she gives Taylor a massive beetle named Atlas. Atlas is awesome. I love Atlas. Amy, because she's a bitch though, gives all of these bugs, makes it so they can't eat food, so they can die, because she didn't want to permanently buff the villain. But at this moment, we have Gru doing like one thing, and we learn Gru's new power is that his shadows allow him to copy other powers. So he briefly copies Amy's power and makes it so Atlas can eat food. So we're chilling. Atlas can stay alive. It's awesome. The other bugs, unfortunately, can't, which is a shame, but, you know, whatever. And now that they've saved Amy, for now, and kind of not scared off Siberian, but, like, tried to scare off Siberian, you know, it's a bit of a mess. It's at this moment the heroes show up, and, like, the 3 of the Protectorate, like, Legend shows up and stuff, and Legend starts to fight Siberian and all the Slaughterhouse Nine. And it's all sort of building up to this final encounter where, number one, Crawler and Mannequin get fucking carpet bombed out of existence. Mannequin just happened to be there, so it's a bit of an unfortunate little mess for him. Crawler, however, does the thing I mentioned earlier, where the Protectorate go, hey man, if you stand still, we'll kill you. We'll actively do it. And he goes, nah, bet. And then they did it. He fucking dies. So that's what happens to Crawler. But before Crawler dies, he spews some acid onto Glory Girl. And Crawler's acid, I guess, is just like impossible. He does it on a couple heroes, but mainly Glory Girl. And it's like melting her face away. So Taylor grabs her, brings her to Amy, you know, her sister, and is like, fix her, Amy. And here's another reason I hate Amy. Amy goes, no, I don't want to do it here. I think I'll fuck it up. And then Tattletale, you know, the kind of psychic person, goes, no, you won't. You can do it here. You're just a bitch. And Amy goes, no, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave with my sister. I'm going to leave, and then leaves. And all the while, she's like mind controlling her sister to calm down. I'll just cut to the chase of what happens there. Amy fucks up. Mentally, her sister's fine. Physically, she like deforms her because she can't remember what her face looks like properly, and then just keeps adding new face on top new face, you know, just like fixing it, but it's making it worse the entire time. So now Glory Girl, at least in my head, looks like a glitched video game character from Assassin's Creed Unity. I'll throw a photo up if nobody knows what that is. But that's kind of what happens with Amy. The big reason I despise Amy, she's dumb. I hate her. That being said, she's very vital to what happens next, because they're fighting the Slaughterhouse Nine, and Jack decides to say fuck it, and he activates Bonesaw's thing. Now, Bonesaw's thing is a chemical weapon that alters the chemicals of your brain, so you forget the faces of everyone, and they all kind of mesh together. Now, here's, you know, you're thinking, okay, well, that's not a problem. Here's like the big scary thing with that. They don't remember the faces of the Slaughterhouse Nine. So anybody in the city could be the Slaughterhouse Nine. And anyone in the city could be anyone. And at this point, everyone's kind of split up from each other. So Taylor is alone, because she was chasing after Jack and Bonesaw while they were activating this. And she actually gets stuck with Jack and Bonesaw, who pretend to be Gru and Tattletale, and Taylor has like no say. She doesn't fucking know until about, I want to say like halfway through when she kind of realizes, oh, this is wrong, which is a very scary moment, I want to say, because you don't know what Jack and Bonesaw are going to do. I think they kill a hero named Battery, who we've met a couple times. I haven't brought her up because she's not that important, but they kill Battery, and they, like, kill a bunch of other people they meet on the way. But they all lead her to this school, which is where Amy is with Glory Girl. So that's where the Glory Girl stuff happened. And they kind of try to recruit Amy because her power is just that OP. They're like, hey, Amy, come on and join us. And Amy's like, no. But she's also kind of like, yes, because her dad's a villain. So for some reason, she thinks she will be a villain. I hate Amy. But this is when Taylor, who's kind of like in the back, goes, okay, now wait a minute. Clearly, they're the Slaughterhouse Nine, and starts shooting at him. Taylor has a gun now. She gets a gun occasionally. Nothing comes of it. The Slaughterhouse Nine kind of run away. Taylor convinces Amy to cure her, like fix her brain. So Amy also makes it that Taylor's like saliva and just bodily fluids will also cure people. So as long as like Taylor's sweating and it, like, you know, or she kisses someone, the cure will transfer. So Taylor does that. She finds Tattletale, kisses Tattletale, cures her, is like, okay, Tattletale, where the fuck did the Slaughterhouse Nine go? Your psychic power should tell us. And Tattletale's like, okay, they went to the docks, or a sort of boat. They have like a boat. That's how they got into the city. So Taylor chases them to the boat, and unfortunately, they are gone. Jack and Bonesaw, and I believe Siberian is also with them, make it out of the city, which spells doom for the world. And it's not just like the world as in, oh, Brockton Bay will die, sort of, in 2 years. No. Dinah mentions that like 75% of the population of the Earth will be wiped, completely gone. So that's what they have to deal with now. They have 2 years to deal with that. But wouldn't it be great if Brockton Bay's rent got even lower before that? I think it would. By now, I want to say, if this little running joke goes on, if rent's at like $150 a month because of the Slaughterhouse Nine showing up, them chemically gassing the city would probably lower it to like 50 cents a month. And if it's anything higher than that, it's fucking highway robbery. And whoever's baking the prices, that should be shot and killed by Coil or somebody who would do it. That being said, why don't we head right on in to how the rent continues to lower in the next part of Worm. So, the creepypasta men have escaped, and, you know, the city is even more destroyed than it was before. So the question is, well, what do you do now? Well, before we get into that, I want to bring up the legend interludes. So, you know, as briefly mentioned, the interludes are getting more important as we continue onwards here, but they're, you know, it varies depending on interlude. But in the legend interlude, and legend is one of the main three of the Protectorate, right? One of the biggies, the big ones. I think he's considered the weakest of the big three, but he's still in the big three. So in the legend interlude, we learn a lot more about Cauldron, which I have not mentioned yet. But to our knowledge, Cauldron is an evil organization giving people superpowers and experimenting on people without their consent, right? Or some people without their consent, creating what are known as Case 53s, which are kind of like, you know, like Beak from the X-Men, right? Where it's like a fucked up chicken guy who clearly shouldn't have powers, and that's kind of what the Case 53s are. So that's sort of what Cauldron has been doing. But in the Legend interlude, we learn that Legend, Alexandria, and Eidolon, the, you know, the big three of the Protectorate, all work for and with Cauldron. And we find out that while Cauldron is kind of doing these fucked up things, they are doing it to save the world. So they know about the end of the world prophecy, and they are attempting to prevent it. So that's sort of what we learn
about Cauldron in this Legend interlude. It kind of puts them in, like, they're not good guys, but they're doing a good thing, if that makes sense. And we'll get back to Cauldron later. But this little section, chapters, or arc 15, for me, is sort of the weakest area of Worm. Because you go from, you know, fighting fucking... sorry, I'm actively reading over my notes. So you go over fighting a kaiju, and then you fight this cool team of creepypastas who, like, are extremely scary, and they fuck up the characters. Like, what they did to Gru is, as previously mentioned, absolutely insane. And it's, you really get the, like, big stakes, right? And then 15 is just sort of like them all chilling out, doing their job for Coil, you know. I will say Taylor and Brian do start to get together, which has been hinted at throughout the whole series, but, like, you know, now they are getting together. Good for them. It's kind of a wonky relationship because clearly Brian just needs a shoulder to lean on, and, like, Taylor doesn't really know if he's doing this because he has genuine feelings or if just, you know, like, he needs fucking help because he was dissected pretty much. So it's not the greatest relationship, but they are starting to get together. Bitch is kind of starting to come around. Bitch has been a bitch the whole time, and at this point in the story, she kind of starts to come around to Taylor. Bitch becomes, like, a really fun character to read about. Tattletale's always nice. I would like Tattletale's dynamic with Taylor has always been great. And then Regent and Imp are kind of, it's hinting that maybe Regent and Imp will get together, which is very interesting, right? I don't know. This is just the stakes for specifically chapter 15. I just don't really feel it. It's slow. There isn't like obviously they want to rescue Dinah from Coil, right? But it's just not necessarily felt like they're taking their time and it's not working. And for me personally, this area of the story just like doesn't work, and there's a lot of fat. I feel like you could definitely trim off of it. But moving on, we get a lot with Trickster, because Coil sends Taylor on a mission. Essentially, Coil's plan has happened. Coil wins. And his last little thing is he sends Taylor on a mission to rough up the mayor candidate of Brockton Bay and make sure he's going to do the right thing. And Tattletale tells Taylor that she's going to get assassinated on this mission. And it just doesn't happen. But we do find out a little bit about Trickster and Genesis went on this mission. And we find out more that nobody in Trickster's group actually likes Trickster. Everyone thinks he's kind of an asshole. They used to like him, is kind of what we learn. But they don't anymore, so that's very interesting. And that's really all that happens in 15. So moving on from 15, Dragon shows back up. Dragon and Defiant. Now, who's Defiant, you're wondering? It's Armsmaster with a new name and a new suit, because corporations are corrupt, and Armsmaster may have committed some crimes, but he's still kind of a good guy, and they're going to use him to hunt down the Slaughterhouse Nine, him and Dragon specifically. But before they do that, they're here to stop the undersiders and the travelers, which is Trickster's group, right? Well, needless to say, our main character's fucking roughhouse with these dragon robots. So as previously mentioned, by the way, Dragon is an AI, and she controls like multiple suits at once, which is what she's doing here, and it's not working very well. So they deal with that, and then the second they leave, Coil wins, basically. He tells them all, like, we're probably never ever going to be in contact again, and, like, whatever. Boy's sick, we're out kind of situation. And then he blows himself up at the mayoral debate, I believe. They got the two candidates who are both in his pockets, and the director of the Brockton Bay Protectorate there. And they're all kind of debating. And then Coil shows up. And Coil, with a couple other guys, just blows himself up. Obviously, this is a ruse. Like, clearly, he's not just going to blow himself up. Something's wrong. But the big thing that comes out of this is Taylor goes blind. Her eyes get, like, seared in the blast. And she ends up going blind. Which, I just feel bad for the undersiders. Like, every single mission they go on, one of them gets a near life-ending injury. 2 times now Taylor has. The one time she was crippled, and this time she is now gone blind. And unlike the one where she got crippled, there was no healer around. So now Taylor is just blind. Not that it necessarily matters, given her power allows her to sort of see what the bugs see in a way, so she can still kind of see, which is... It leads to some fun moments we'll get into with characters, but she's basically Daredevil. Just imagine that, right? Female Daredevil, but instead of being a cool ninja, she is covered in disgusting, slimy, dirty bugs. That being said, that's kind of the end. That's 15, and then the beginning of 16. And the back half of 16, I think, is when it picks back up. So, why don't we get right on into that? So the back half of 16 / the end of 16, right? Taylor has gone blind. And immediately she sets out, she goes, you know what? Okay, I don't even care that I'm blind. She still wants to free Dinah. You know, kind of a heroic act. Finally, for once in her entire life, Taylor does something a hero would do. So they go to meet Coil. And by they, I mean her. Taylor alone. And Coil goes, yeah, so here's the thing. I am not going to free the girl because she's useful. You should have seen this coming. Taylor did see it coming. Like, obviously, Coil, the evil supervillain mastermind, isn't gonna free the future-seeing girl. Like, why would he do that? So what he instead does is fucking tries to blow the house up that Taylor and him are in. He leaves because, like, you know, he can create multiple worlds and whatnot. So Taylor's in this, like, exploding, burning building. She's never seen it before, and she's blind. So she, like, narrowly escapes. He has, like, a firing squad on the building. It's a bad situation all around, right? She makes it out of the firing squad because she does this thing at this point in the story where she'll make clones with her bugs. So she'll just get, like, 1,000 bugs and put them in the shape of a human. But because she also surrounds herself with bugs, it's nearly impossible to tell, like, which one is real and which one's a clone. Very cool use of bug powers. I haven't mentioned that in a while. The superpowers in Worm are fantastic. So she escapes by driving a car. Now you may be wondering how a blind person who I don't believe has a license drives a car. Bug powers, I guess. If you had bug powers, you would know. I couldn't tell you. She does make it scot-free, recruits the undersiders again, and then they track down Coil, who they find out is the new director of the PRT, because in Coil's bombing, it killed the previous Brockton Bay director of the PRT. So we learn that Coil's secret identity is actually the director of the PRT, because he wanted to control both the heroes and the villains, which is kind of fucked up, and I don't really see why it's necessary. But they don't really get into it, because they track Coil down, beat his ass, and then as he's villain monologuing, and he's like, oh, you guys aren't gonna kill me, because you're losers. You can't kill me. Taylor blows his brains out. That's it. That's the end of Coil. I mean, there's some roadblocks I didn't get into on the way, but I like it, and it was great, but it's also... It happened very quickly. And maybe that's just a me thing, I don't know. But Coil had this... And I do like it, don't get me wrong, but this video would get boring if it was just me recapping the story and being like, it would be good. So I'm trying to get some complaints in here. I like it, it's great, but also it feels a little rushed. Because the Slaughterhouse Nine got like 3
to 4 entire arcs worth of content, and they're going to get more. Spoiler alert, but they are. So I don't... and Coil has, like, the most build-up. The entire story has been about Coil and building to Coil, and he dies really easily. And, like, I know he's a dude, so shooting him is fine, but I just mean the way they beat him, because, like, what happens is they have him, so he has the undersiders surrounded, and then, like, with guys with guns and mercenaries and stuff, and then Tattletale just goes, yeah, well, I paid them all in advance to double what you paid them, Coil, so they're gonna work for me. And then they turn on Coil, which is kind of like a fun climax, but, like, I don't know, it just, something with it's not sitting right. Maybe set that up or something, because I think the problem I have with it is when they were there in the situation, there was zero hope. Like, the way it was written, where they had all these guys on them, and we thought it was over. Like, there was like 20 mercenaries with ARs trained on all the characters, as well as some of Trickster's gang, or the Travelers. So you think it's over, and then just immediately Tattletale's like, yeah, nah. And then the tension for me was gone. And I don't know, maybe, I think my issue is, and I just realized this, speaking about it, is it doesn't feel like there's stakes, absolutely. Like, you want to save Dinah. You feel bad for Dinah because you've gotten POVs from Dinah and Coil and interludes, and they're just depressing. It's this 12-year-old girl he has hooked up to drugs nearly, like, 24/7. She's in constant pain. Like, you feel bad for Dinah. But I didn't feel like there was any danger for the undersiders. Whereas with the Slaughterhouse Nine, they dissect Brian, and the only reason he's alive is because he double triggered, which is like an extremely rare thing to do. And it also makes sense he would double trigger because he was being dissected alive. Whereas, like, with this, it's like none of them were in any danger. It's not, it's not like, holy shit, Regent almost died, or hell, Regent did die here, Like, shit just kind of happens, and it doesn't, I don't know, there's no tension. But I will tell you what, they blow Coil's brains out. It's very satisfying, because, oh, he's dead. So now what? Well, here's the kicker. When they killed Coil, Noelle got out of her 17. This is one of my favorite arcs in Worm. And it is really when it picks back up, in my opinion. You had a little lull with the Coil stuff. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. But this picks back up. And it is a very big shift. It is an entire arc from the perspective of a man named Kraus, a person who will later become Trickster, the leader of the Travelers. In this, we are introduced to Luke, who becomes Ballistic. We are introduced to Marissa, who becomes Sundancer, and Jess, who becomes Genesis, as well as a person named Oliver, who we know is in the book later but hasn't done much. We're introduced to Noelle, who is dating Kraus, and we're introduced to an asshole named Cody, who we'll get back to Cody later. But essentially what happens here is it's about these teenagers who are, they're about to participate in a video game tournament, which is kind of funny. It's not something I expected. And as they're doing that, a big earthquake hits. And they don't know what's going on. Their building is, ruptured, whatever. It's fucked up. So they have to get outside. And when they get outside, the Simurgh is there. Now, the Simurgh is the other Endbringer outside of Behemoth and Leviathan. And this one, pictures will be on screen, though I'm not sure how much I could show. She's most always, like, naked in art, so I'll try my best. But, we don't know much about Simurgh, right? Except in this moment, she's throwing buildings, fighting a bunch of other superheroes, and, she's also appears to be a tinkerer, which they mention that if there are any other tinkerers around her, she can, like, sort of absorb their power and use their tinkerer powers. Essentially what I'm saying is she's very fucked up and powerful. And, it's a bad sign when Simurgh is in your city. as we find out over the course of a couple chapters here that Jess or Genesis, I think I'll just call them their superhero names to make it easier. We find out that Genesis is a big superhero fan and knows a lot about superheroes and a lot more than other people. And what essentially happens is the Simurgh opened a portal to another Earth. We'll say Earth Alpha, I believe is what they called it. And then teleported specifically the travelers to Earth Beta, essentially, which is the one where Worm takes place. I don't know if I got the Earth names right, but that's basically what happened. The travelers got plucked out of their nice Earth, which apparently barely has any superpowers, which is why, like, the rest of the travelers don't know a lot about them, except Jess, who's just, like, a mega fan. And then they got taken to shitty Worm Earth. And then this is where we learn the other thing about the Simurgh, is that constantly when you're around her, you hear a screaming in your head that will always get louder and louder until it just randomly stops, and that kind of drives you crazy, kind of plays your emotions up. And then 2, if you are caught in the Simurgh's radius with the screaming, she can see your future and she can dictate what will happen. So, like, she doesn't necessarily, it's not like she can control the future, but, like, when she has you in, like, the scream, which kind of, like, plays your emotions up, she can either make it happen, like, right now. So let's say she sees in the future that in, like, while she's screaming in 5 minutes, if she makes you really angry, you'll kill someone, like, super important. Like, maybe maybe somehow you ran into, like, a senator, and then she'll make you, like, super angry, so you'll kill the senator. Or let's say 5 years from now, if she makes you super angry and you, like, kill a really like, in 5 years from now, she makes you super angry when you cross paths with someone even more important, right? It's stuff like that. It's not the greatest example, but that's what she does. So it's kind of a mystery as to, like, why the travelers themselves, like, they must be super important, right? If they get plucked from their simple life from a nice Earth to this shitty, terrible Earth. And we know Noelle, in real time has been freed, and it's not great, right? So, like, what the fuck is gonna happen? So they go through, these chapters are really long, and I'll be honest, I really love them. Trickster, because of these chapters, became my favorite character, and I'm a little mad that he doesn't get any more POVs later. But these chapters are kind of long because they're trying to, like, basically apocalypse survive in this Simurgh city. The guards, like, or the cops, like, wall it off, or the protectorate, I should say, so no one's allowed in or out, because it's like, no, you've been affected by the Simurgh, so you're fucking stuck here. You can never leave, right? But Trickster finds a Cauldron can, which, of course, Simurgh obviously probably knew he was going to do this, but he finds a Cauldron can with superpowers, and he decides, fuck it, we need to get home. That's kind of his whole goal. As well as Noelle got injured. Noelle's, like, bleeding really badly, and she got injured, and they can't really take her to the hospital because they're not from this Earth, and interdimensional travel isn't really allowed. Plus, they've been in the Simurgh, like, blast radius, which means, at least from Trickster's thinking, and he is right, they would be, like, priority number what the fuck, and would probably just get executed. Because if Simurgh has brought people from another Earth, that means they are more important than most human beings can dream of being. So, Kraus decides to take these superpowers. And here's where we kind of learn why the group doesn't really like Kraus or Trickster. And it's because, one, he's sometimes a bit of an asshole. Like, he'll make jokes. It's very, like, the character archetype where, like, his life sucks, or he doesn't like life, so he's making jokes to sort of combat that. But sometimes he can be a bit of an asshole. And then also, the big reason people don't like him in the future is because he will make decisions for the group without asking the group or telling the group. which will, and they'll have ramifications for the entire group. Case in point being him downing superpowers without telling a soul, and then the rest of the group kind of decides, well, if he's getting them, we should all get them. Except Oliver, who doesn't. Well, we'll get to that, but... So Krause's Trickster's ability, I haven't really talked about Trickster's ability. He can teleport, but he has to... And he can make other objects teleport. But he has to do it with... He has to trade places with an object of around the same weight. So, like, he could make you teleport with, let's say, like, a couch, right? Let's say if you're a big dude and, you're a tiny couch, I should say. But, he can make you switch places. Or, like, him and you can switch places. Very unique power when it comes to just, like, teleporting. Because, most of the time when you see teleporting, it's just like, yeah, they can teleport. But this one, I like, has this, it has a limiting factor on it. And it's fun to watch him... Because this is something we didn't really see with Taylor, is it's fun to watch Krause as he got his superpowers and sort of learning how to use them for a little bit at least. But he goes to Noelle and is like, hey, take these superpowers. But she doesn't really want to. She doesn't know. She doesn't trust it, right? So she only drinks half of them. Which we're unsure. I'll be upfront about it. I'm not going to fully explain what Noelle is until the next part. But I'm unsure if drinking half the vial was the reason Noelle turned out to be what she was, or if it was just, like, fate. And the book doesn't really spell it out either. I think it's kind of supposed to be up to, sort of, maybe it was, both of the factors. But regardless, she only drinks half of it. And then because she drank half of it, Oliver decides to drink half of it. And Oliver's power... nothing wrong happens to Oliver. His power just becomes that he can morph his body to look different. But the way Krause describes it is it's like he doesn't know he's doing it, so it just happens. Like when Oliver sees a person that he thinks is like beautiful or good looking, he just accidentally morphs his face to look like that permanently. So he's making him... It's just... In my head, I imagined it as, like, the Chad meme. So, like, he's just constantly making himself look like that, so he looks less and less like Oliver. I guess. Oliver is not an important character, and he does nothing. So, forget about him. But here's where we learn a little bit about Noelle. And this is weird, but she starts growing, like, tentacles out of her body, but they're not like squid tentacles. They look like they're made of flesh and shit. And they've got like eyeballs and mouths, and it's really disgusting. And she's kind of started to lose her mind. And she's not really there mentally. But on top of that, and she's getting bigger and bigger, and you need to like feed her more and more. But on top of that, if the tentacles touch you, or or they eat you. It's kind of both. So if they touch you, and then if you're eaten, she can make clones of you. And then she can give those clones superpowers. So let's say, for instance, she ate a Taylor. If she ate Taylor, and then she ate, let's say, Krause as well, or Trickster, she could make a Krause clone with his teleporting ability, but also with the ability to control bugs, and vice versa with Taylor. So that's what Noelle can do. And we're gonna let's get right into arc 18 on the Noelle stuff, because if you thought Worm was fucked up before, it's about to get more fucked up. Alright, so a lot of shit happens with the Noelle stuff. It lasts from about 18 to arcs 19, which is a lot. There's also a lot of interludes in here. Some of them are important. The only one that, like, the two I will mention is the three maybe, is we get a Theo interlude. He still has not triggered, so he needs to get on that if he plans on killing Jack. We get an interlude from a homeless man named Kevin, who we learn is, as he calls himself, the most powerful man in the world, because he was the first human to ever have contact with Scion, who I haven't mentioned a lot, but is the golden
Superman of this world, and he told Scion to heal or help people. Like, Scion just was kind of standing there, and Kevin was like, hey, why don't you go save people who need saving? You have superpowers, go do that. So that's kind of what Scion has been doing. And what we see at the end of it is Kevin realizes, and it's been like years now, but Kevin goes to the spot they originally met and realizes he should have told Scion to do more, so he tells Scion to murder the Endbringers. He goes, well, if he'll listen to me, then I might as well fuck it up and tell him, what's what. And then we also learn that the heroes call Noelle Echidna. That's like her supervillain name. So that's what I will be calling Noelle. I'll probably switch back and forth, but because they're kind of like two personalities. There's like the Echidna personality and then the Noelle personality, but it doesn't really matter. So they all just fight. The heroes and villains decide to work together because this is an Endbringer level threat, as Tattletale calls it. It's like a pseudo Endbringer. So it's the step below an Endbringer, but is essentially an Endbringer. She's fucked up. The problem is you can't really touch her, which happens. So a lot of this fight is like them trying to fight a kaiju. By the way, again, she's in Brockton Bay. Fuck this city. This city is terrible. Somehow they managed to keep this whole battle to one section of the city, so it never gets out to the rest of the world. But holy shit, this city sucks. If I had to live in the Worm universe, I'd live anywhere but here. I would rather live in Newfoundland, and that place doesn't even fucking exist anymore. Brockton Bay is terrible, regardless. A lot of this Noelle Echidna stuff is the villains and heroes sort of fighting other, like, themselves, right? Because there's a bunch of clones and shit. I did forget to mention there is a Slaughterhouse 9 interlude where they get access to cloning technology, and they also, Bonesaw has access to every other Nine's, like, every past member of the Slaughterhouse 9's DNA, so they plan on making Slaughterhouse 9 clones, which is a very fucked up thing to think about, considering 9 of them, it took, like, every hero in Brockton Bay and villain in Brockton Bay to lose to the 9 of them, so imagine that with, like, a bunch more, right? That being said, I will say, Wildbow does these things. This is more a critique on the pacing of Worm. He does these things where you'll get an insane chapter. It'll be the craziest chapter you've ever read. Holy shit, everything's going down. People are dying left and right. Action's going down. Oh my god, I can't wait. And then you'll go to the next chapter, and it's a fucking interlude that has nothing to do with the rest of the story. And, like, the Slaughterhouse 9 cloning thing is very important and obviously has something to do with the rest of the story. Why is it in between other chapters? And I believe I learned that because he has a Patreon, so the, like, interludes, I think if enough people pay, like, it was, like a Patreon reward, which is cool. I don't know if that's true, but I think that's true, which is that's cool. But, like, I don't know, maybe make it after the big, like, maybe just do like 5 interludes in a row, because why are they in the middle of these cool ass fights? Regardless, so while everyone's kind of fighting each other, we're introduced to some more wards, like Tech-10 and I didn't write their names down. I feel bad. I should have written their names down. They become important later, so we'll get to them later. But I really like this part because we get to see the heroes and the villains work together, and there's this great moment where Clockblocker and Taylor sort of have like a duel with words, right? They kind of debate each other, but it's really well done because Taylor she's in like an armored car with a bunch of the heroes, like some of the wards and like Miss Militia and stuff, and she kind of gets them to see her way, where she's like, yeah, I've done some fucked up things, but I did it to kill Coil and save a little girl. Also, you guys kind of suck and are a little bit corrupt. Have you ever thought about that? And it kind of ruins the hero's day before they get to fight. But Noelle wants the undersiders because in her mind, she knows the undersiders killed Coil, and she thinks Coil could have cured her, which, as Coil does mention, is fucking impossible. Not a chance in the world could Noelle be cured, because she just, something's broke about her. Which I think this is the best time to bring up passengers, which is something Tattletale brings up in the middle of the fight. So essentially, when someone either drinks a Cauldron superhero in a bottle little drink, or they trigger and gain superpowers naturally, what happens is a little thing that Tattletale calls a passenger attaches to you, and it's essentially a being from another universe that is like, let me grip onto you, and then that's how you get your superpowers. At least that's her theory, which we'll get more into that later. But that's the theory, and the theory is Noelle's passenger just got fucked up. And we don't know if it got fucked up because of the bottle, or Simurgh, or just fate. But it got fucked, and it got fucked bad. So that's what's going on with Noelle. That's why she is the way she is. But big shit happens here, because all of the big three of the Protectorate show up, because they're fucking idiots. And the Undersiders and Taylor and Tattletale and even some of the heroes warn them, do not come here, because if you get cloned, this could be the end of the world. If the three most powerful people who can fight Endbringers get cloned and are evil, what the fuck? Well, of course they do get cloned, and the second the clones pop out, they start talking about Cauldron, and they divulge the whole Cauldron thing. Because this is where we also find out that the clones have memories of the people they've been cloned of. So they divulge the entire thing about Cauldron buying superpowers. The Cauldron's making the Case-53s. They talk about the fact that Cauldron is trying to... The Cauldron founded the Protectorate, so the Protectorate has always been biased and, evil. We learn that Alexandria, her secret identity is the leader of the Protectorate, which is a big no-no. The big rule about the Protectorate is the higher-ups should be regular people. That way it's not controlled by superheroes and doesn't ever get corrupt. Well, we learn it's always been controlled by superheroes and has always been corrupt. So that kind of puts a bombshell in most of the heroes' perspective. A lot of the heroes at this kind of give up, because they're like, oh shit, what have I even been fighting for? And, the person next to me could be working for Cauldron. That's disgusting and dirty. But of course, Noelle is still a problem. So we get one of my favorite moments here, where Taylor uses a spider to sew some silk, and then has Clockblocker freeze the silk, because he freezes things in time. So when Noelle runs across the silk, she gets bisected, just cut right in half, like you're cutting a wedding cake open. And it's fucking awesome, because this leads to them murdering Noelle. And you think, okay, well, she's an Endbringer. How do they murder her? Well, they just pull Sundancer up, the member of the Travelers, and just have her create a mini sun and literally burn Noelle to ashes. Which was a little anticlimactic, I'll be honest. I was a little okay, that's it. But it's also fun as hell. By the way, my air conditioner just popped on, so if that is heard in the background, apologies. I tried to record that off, but, God's fucking me right now. And that's it. That's basically how they kill Noelle, and it ends with, Tattletale had brought in Faultline's crew, who I will never explain. Faultline's crew is mostly made of Case-53s, and they've been fighting Cauldron. But they don't do anything in this story, later or now. The only thing they do is they have a member called Labyrinth. They have a couple members who, in conjunction, Tattletale uses them to create a portal to Earth Alpha so the Travelers can go back home. And the Travelers do go back home, except Trickster, and this is going to piss me off, except Trickster, who betrays all the heroes and villains and works with Noelle because they were dating and he still loves her, which I think is fair. But he betrays them. Never does he betray Noelle and try to stop Noelle, seeing how dangerous she is. And this is it. Trickster just is fucking gone. Technically, he becomes a student of Teacher, who is a supervillain in the Birdcage, which is the prison. I haven't really brought it up. And Teacher mind controls people. So Trickster's gone. He is never Trickster ever again. And could you tell? Am I butthurt? Am I fucking angry that my favorite character just goes away, is an asshole to the end, and disappears? Yes, I am very mad. At least give him like a redemption arc or a redemption moment. I don't need an arc, but maybe he like takes Noelle, maybe he traps Noelle and that's how they get her with Sundance, or I don't know. I'm very angry about it. To this day, I've had many an argument, or many a talk about it with my friend who got me into Worm. It makes me very mad. That being said, this is the end of the Echidna arc, and next we move back into the Slaughterhouse Nine. So why don't we get into that? Alright, I want to start this section with a little bit of a hurrah. We are more than halfway through Worm. This is arc 20 of 30. That being said, I have no idea how much longer the video is because I am actively recording it, and I have yet to record, past 20, which is what we're doing right here. So hurrah to being almost done with Worm, and hurrah to maybe being halfway through the video, or more than halfway through the video. Who knows? Well, you viewers know, but I don't. So, 20 is a bit of a shift, right? We go from fighting kaijus to creepypastas to super villain overlords who have been teased. So, you think it's over. Like, well, what happened? I mean, obviously the Slaughterhouse Nine are coming back, but like the big things you set up are kind of over for now. So we sort of get chill time, Taylor and Brian are together now. Imp and Regent are kind of teasing getting together. You don't really know what's going on there. Taylor and Bitch have become great friends, and or Rachel, which is Bitch's real name, and they're actually working together, and it's fun. And Taylor and Tattletale are also great friends. But this is kind of where we get, like, you think, okay, we're chill, we're having a chill moment. Everything gets fucked up here. Because we meet this guy named Greg. And Greg knows, he goes to Taylor's school, figures out Taylor is Skitter, and tries to contact Taylor. So Taylor goes to school, fucking gaslights this guy, and it's like, I'm not Skitter, I don't know what you're talking about, you're crazy, leave me alone, you weirdo. Which, Greg seemed a little weird, but I kind of felt a little bad for him. And then Taylor decides that, you know what, she's at school for the first time in probably 5 months. Why not go to school? So she goes to sign up in the little school district board. And then it immediately, like when she goes to put in her address, it already pops an address up on the computer, and it's Skitter's address. Like the apartment where she lives is Skitter. Oh, I don't know why I said it like that, voice crack. And she freaks out. So she starts running. And then, boom, the heroes are here. Because some of the heroes, the wards, go to the school. So they show up, and it's bad, right? They're like, holy shit, Skitter's here. What kind of, like, domestic terrorist act is she going to commit at this school? This crazy supervillain overlord, And as she's trying to get away, Dragon and Defiant, a.k.a. Arms Master, which I've brought up before, but, I'll probably just call him Arms Master because that's what I called him when I was reading it. So Dragon and Arms Master show up, and then they out Taylor. They straight up give away Taylor's secret identity in front of the entire school. It's being recorded as well, so everyone online now knows that Taylor is Skitter. But here's the kicker. They also do it in front of Emma. Now, I haven't mentioned Emma in, 15 arcs, because Wildbow doesn't either, which is part of an issue I have with Worm, that there's a lot of world building going on here, and some parts of the beginning of Worm and the world building for that kind of disappear until later, and sometimes they just disappear forever. Regardless, though, Emma's here, and it's a great moment because Emma is an absolute piece of shit, and while Taylor is right next to her making fun, and she's making fun of Taylor, she finds out Taylor is Skitter and basically loses her mind, and it's fantastic, and Taylor loves it as well. Taylor's like, I didn't want my identity out, but this is great. So she does eventually end up escaping because some of the students there are like, fuck the heroes. Taylor is actually a good person who gives food away to homeless people and helps save lives. So Taylor escapes, and it's this kind of big moment where you're like, okay, so they're gonna go to war with with Dragon and Defiant and the Protectorate, right? But not really. And you kind of just get a lot of chapters of Taylor, like, coming to terms with things, and it's really weird, where she's, like, basically saying goodbye. Like, she goes to Bitch, and she goes to Regent and Imp, and is like, hey, if I'm not around, we're gonna be chill, right? Like, we're okay. And they're like, yeah, what are you talking about? And she's like, nah, nothing. And that's really all that happens here. Like, obviously there's some big stuff, like Parahumans, who's a character I don't think I've mentioned, but maybe I have. She joins the Undersiders, and her and Fletchett are kind of, or Fletchett, I don't know how to say her name, are kind of together, and Fletchett's like a hero, so then Fletchett decides to join the Undersiders, which is kind of fun, but you don't really get perspectives from them, so it doesn't really matter. They are cool characters, though. I enjoy them, but, like, there are 1,000 cool characters in Worm that it is impossible to keep up, and none of them get perspectives, except the odd interludes, so it's a lot of characters are kind of lost in the mind. But then Taylor, she gives up. She goes to the PRT and asks to be arrested, and just, like, gives up. Which is how 20 and 20... Well, that's how 21 ends. So 20 kind of builds into 21, and then or 20 ends with the secret identity exposure, and then 21 ends with her just giving up, which is very weird. And they're two great chapters that set up the future of Worm, but reading them in real time is very weird, because you have no idea what Taylor's plans are, and she's also a really violent and wanted criminal. Like, this is not a good idea, in my opinion, and we're going to get into that in 22, which I want to save for its own section, because it might be really long and a big rant. So why don't we just get right on into 22. Alright, it's arc 22. What the fuck was Taylor thinking? Genuinely, her, by the way, alright, her plan was to get arrested and then go to the birdcage, but she wanted to demand things. So she gets arrested, and she's like, well, listen, you need to let go of the villains. Now, her motives are altruistic, okay? She wants this to happen so there can be a nice truce between the heroes and the villains, so they can all team up and fight the Slaughterhouse Nine, and the Behemoth, and the Submerg, and the Leviathan, right? Fine enough, okay? I understand her motivations for wanting to do this. But as she knows, and as we, the viewer, know, Cauldron owns the Protectorate. They are a corrupt organization, or at the very least, somewhat corrupt. So I don't know where... And they also don't like her. She's a villain, and they're good guys. So I don't know what her little thought process here was, but it didn't make any fucking sense. We do get the return of the GOAT, Danny Hebert, Taylor's dad, who admittedly is a little shocked his child has committed a amount of heinous crimes, but then kind of sits with it because it's his child and he loves her, which fucking respect to one of the best dads I've ever seen in anything. Crazy, my dude, Danny. Bro does not care. He's like, nah, you're my daughter. You cut a man's eyes out, you my daughter. Cracked. I love Danny Hebert. That being said, she just goes in there and, like, argues with the head of the Brockton Bay Protectorate, Tag, and Tag is a piece of shit who hates superheroes, so that's never gonna work. And then Alexandria comes in, like, the head of the entirety of the Protectorate and one of the strongest super people on the planet, and she tries to talk with Alexandria, but here's the thing, Alexandria is an absolute bitch. I don't, what a piece of shit Alexandria is. Not a good superhero or good person, I think, behind the scenes. And this shit's crazy because here's Alexandria's plan. So Taylor's plan was fucking stupid, right? But here's Alexandria's plan. Taylor has one of the most powerful superpowers really anyone has seen. She can control any bug within, like, a huge miles upon miles of a radius, basically, right? Any bug. And Alexandria's plan is to pretend kill the undersiders. So Alexandria goes, for every 5 minutes, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to grab an undersider. I'm going to bring them back here. And if I have to, I'll kill them. Until Taylor, like, surrenders and gets rid of her demands. So she does it. She brings in one unconscious. And Taylor can, like, sense him with the bugs, right? And Alexandria's like, okay, that's one. So then they talk for 5 minutes. And Alexandria goes, oh, time's up. Let me go grab another undersider. So, but this time, she brings back 2 corpses. So Taylor, understandably, freaks out and murders Alexandria and Director Tag. Now, how does Taylor, a person who can only control bugs, murder someone who has impenetrable skin and is super powerful? Well, I'll tell you how. She shoves bugs down her windpipe until she suffocates and, like, almost kind of drowns on bugs. So that's how Alexandria, one of the most powerful people on the planet, was killed by fucking Taylor because they were fucking around. Here's the thing, by the way. I said Alexandria's plan was stupid. They were fake bodies. She didn't even grab the undersiders. She never did that. So, yay. Good for you, Alexandria. Now you're fucking dead. That's great. 22 ends, by the way, with, Dragon and Defiant showing up, Dragon and Arms Master showing up and being like, you know what, she was corrupt anyways. Why don't you join the wards? And Taylor accepts. And they do convince, like, to ease the rest of the world, they lie and say that Alexandria was like, I mean, she wasn't really, she was corrupt, but it's not like she was evil. Well, they kind of lie to the rest of the world and go, yeah, Alexandria was like a super evil bitch, and Taylor helped kill us, so now she's going to join the wards as the Weaver. Instead of Skitter, because that's a villain name, she's going to be Weaver. I think both names are really solid. However, the Weaver name is only around for, like, these last 10 arcs, so it's kind of really hard to call her that. Like, it's hard to ingrain that in my brain, so I'm probably just going to keep calling her Taylor and maybe Skitter. But that's 22, so let's get right into Taylor's little superhero adventures. It only took 20 fucking chapters, arcs, so let's get right into that in 23. Alright, so 23 is going to be a bit of a short one, and it's mostly not even going to be story recap, it's just going to be me complaining. So as mentioned last time, Taylor joins the wards, really because she has to, but she also kind of wanted to, because she feels bad about being an undersider now that everyone knows. Of course, it's only after the entire world figures out who she is does she feel bad, but regardless. So she's like, I want to join the wards. So Taylor becomes Weaver, right? I'll have some Weaver art on screen. I do like her Weaver costume. I like both her Skitter costume and her Weaver costume. They're both cool. They both fit. Weaver has a jetpack, which is kind of fucking sick. But I do have a slight problem with this. So, she has now joined the wards, where we meet characters like Tech-Tin, and who's kind of like the leader of... She joins the Chicago wards, by the way. So we meet... This isn't our first time meeting Tech-Tin, but we meet Tech-Tin and a bunch of other characters that unfortunately I didn't write their names down, and I don't remember their names because they don't fucking do anything. The only one of any importance is Theo, who is now on the wards. If we remember Theo, he's the guy who has to fight Jack Slash, and he goes by Golem. I'm just going to keep calling him Theo, but his power is if he sticks his hand in like a rock, let's say he sticks his hand in iron, then he can make a big hand out of iron. There'll be art for it on screen as well. He's got a fun power. He's not very good with it, and it doesn't seem useful. But 23 kind of exists to set up the Chicago wards and have Taylor become friends with them. But the problem is, Taylor doesn't really become friends with them throughout the rest of the story. Like, she starts to in 23 and 24, and a little bit after. But then, like, the Slaughterhouse Nine stuff happens, and the story ends, and I don't think this is, like, an abysmally slow part. It's very interesting because, she's a ward and the stuff we're gonna get to. But I also just don't think it fits, and I think it would make more sense if Taylor, as the leader of the undersiders, just kind of made a deal with the heroes. Like, maybe all the heroes decided, yeah, fuck it, we have bigger things to worry about than the undersiders, and they want to work with us. It doesn't fully work, this whole thing, in my opinion, because I just don't think it was given enough time. I think if Wildbow, and personally, in my opinion, obviously, but like, maybe some people love this part, but if Wildbow really wanted to, like, truly get that feeling of Taylor's joining the wards and, like, make me truly care about these characters, which they're fun, by the way. I know I don't remember their names, but while you're reading Worm, they are fun characters. I feel like we should have got in at least an arc or two of just them doing shit. I don't know. That's my thoughts on this, on 23. Very short. That being said, 23 ends with fucking Behemoth showing up. You know, the most powerful of the Endbringers, according to lore. I think Simurgh might be a little more powerful, but Behemoth physically is more powerful, and he shows up at the end of 23. So, 24 is going to get crazy. Let's just get right into it. Yeah, alright. Behemoth's here. What the fuck does Behemoth do, you may be asking? Well, he's essentially Godzilla. You know, he's got the flames, he's super big, and he's got kaiju, and he stomps around, and he's also got this kill zone. Now, what are you asking? What the fuck is a kill zone? Well, a kill zone means if you are in with a certain mile radius of him, you just evaporate. You die like a bug dies when they fly into a fly trap. That shit is gonzos. You are nothing. You reduce to fucking atoms if you're even near Behemoth. Not to mention he has impenetrable skin. So, how do you fight Behemoth? You fucking don't. And in fact, that's what Taylor does. She and the wards get there, and she immediately takes control. Tecton kind of gives it to her because she has fought 2 Endbringers with Leviathan and Echidna / Noelle before. So Tecton's sort of like, I'll be the leader, but like you can tell us what to do. And the first thing Taylor does is join the undersiders, because the undersiders are on the battle. So she shows up to the undersiders and goes, okay, we're combining teams, because that's what she wants to do. She wants everyone, heroes and villains, to work together so they can fight the Slaughterhouse Nine, which is a good goal, in my opinion. So that's really what happens here. There's a bunch of stuff going on. The main things, Cauldron's here. They kind of do some shenanigans. They talk about how they're trying to save the world, and Taylor doesn't really believe them. We meet the Yang Ban, which is this Chinese cult of superheroes. Cody from the Traveler's arc was basically enslaved into joining them. And here's one of the things. I mentioned this earlier when I talked about how I wish Worm... It's very long, but I wish it was longer with different POVs, like other big, long, epic fantasy series. Because you get one interlude from Cody's perspective. And now Cody was a super asshole in the Travelers, but I don't think that means anyone deserves to be mentally enslaved, right? Into a cult. And you get this POV from Cody where he goes, shit, this sucks. I'm out. And he decides to, like, murder the cult. But there's, like, this girl he kind of has a crush on. So he's like, I'm going to go save her. And it never comes up ever again. It's never mentioned. I mean, maybe I missed a little line where the Yang Band are like, yeah, we killed him. But either way, that's not great writing. And I want to mention, this series is great. Reading it is fantastic. It reads well. And Wildbow is a very good writer. And dropped plot lines happen in every fantasy series. They happen in some of my favorite. But for me, at least, there's a difference between dropped plot lines when, let's say, an author brings up something in book 2 and then kind of forgets about it by book, like, 10 of the series. You know, that is... You're I don't really know how to explain it, but in my opinion, that's valid. Obviously, it sucks and drop plot lines are terrible, but it's just how the nature goes. However, it's one thing to introduce a plot line in the last 9 arcs. The last 9 chapters, essentially, of a series. And then to just never bring it up again. And listen, maybe Wildbow wants to make a whole series about Cody, and if he does, obviously, this segment of the video becomes invalid. But as of 2023, what a weird fucking interlude. Especially about Cody, a character who was just a complete asshole in the Traveler's arc. And, now, kind of starting to care about it. It makes me feel bad for him, and then it doesn't matter, because it never comes up again. Moving off of that, they essentially nuke Behemoth with this, super uber energy nuke that you think would kill him, and it kind of reduces his, half of his body to a skeleton, and then he just heals. Which is, holy shit, you can't kill these things. And, after that nuke is dropped, we get... There's a couple close calls with, Tattletale and Brian. You think, oh shit, they almost die. But this is the first time we get an actual major character death in Worm, where Imp and Regent at this point have completely gotten together. Sort of. Basically gotten together. It obviously happens off screen because we only ever follow Taylor, and she's been with the Wards for a while now. But Imp is Behemoth is attacking Imp, and she's hiding, but it's barely working. And Regent distracts Behemoth long enough that Imp gets away, but unfortunately Regent passes away. And I'm very mixed on this. Because one, I think it works very well in the sense that, it shows how strong these Endbringers are and how fucked up they can be, and how we need to stop them and we all need to work together. I think it does a great job in showing that. And it also makes sense, they really gonna fight basically 3 Endbringers and not lose a single one? I understand it makes sense. But it feels weird because I feel like Regent, his character just didn't fully develop. Him, out of all the undersiders, he gets the least development the entire time. And it feels really weird because he could be a really interesting character with his, fucked up childhood and his evil dad who is, wants to hunt him but doesn't know where he is. And how, sometimes you can see maybe Regent wants to be better than his dad and better than his childhood and better than his family. I feel like there's a lot there that we just don't get now, right? And then on top of that, I feel like he did slightly grow off screen with him and Imp. At the beginning of the series, I never would have imagined him in any form of relationship, just because that's the way he was. And then at this point in the series, I think he genuinely loves Imp. I mean, he dies for her. And it just feels weird that his character just doesn't end. And you could also say that is well, that's realistic as well. That adds to the fact that they are fighting an Endbringer. This is a fucked up situation. But personally for me, from a a writing standpoint, I'm okay with him dying by an Endbringer. I just feel like maybe we get 2 Regent interludes before the Behemoth stuff starts. We build his character, maybe finish his character arc, show he has grown and changed, even if it's just a little bit of growth and change. Maybe that's just me though. I don't know. I gotta stop saying that. This is my fucking video. Fuck all of you. This is my opinion. So that happens. Regent dies. All hope is lost. Holy shit, everything's going down. Everything's bad. This is terrible. And then Scion shows up. Because you remember that interlude where the strongest man on the planet told Scion to go kill some Endbringers? Well, goddamn Scion does. He rips Behemoth in half. Bruh does not spare a second. Destroys Behemoth. After, a lot of casualties and death, we have finally murdered a single Endbringer. And all it took was God, basically. I mean, we don't know. Sion's not God, but, he could be if he's that powerful. And that's kind of how the Behemoth arc ends. the biggest thing outside of Behemoth and Regent dying is Taylor is sort of trapped in between the wards world. Like, she still wants to be a ward, and she really wants to, but she also really wants to be an undersider. And I like Taylor as a character. She's a very well written character, and her growth is very realistic. But there are points where, for chapters upon chapters, she just repeats the same shit. It's just, oh, I want to be a hero, but I also want to hang out with the undersiders. Like, I understand it, but I feel like you mention it once or twice and you move on, because at this point in Worm, it was driving me insane. And, I'll save that for the next part, because the next part has more of that. So that was 24 and mixes of 25, so let's get into the rest of it. So, chapter 25 in Worm is a little bit weird, I'm gonna be honest. You kind of just mostly, they do a lot of the, like, aftermath of Behemoth, but only from Taylor's perspective, obviously. You get a whole, 2 chapters about Taylor and the Chicago wards kind of fighting villains, which is what I was asking for earlier, where I was like, I wish we got more of them just, chilling. You get, 2 chapters of it. They're not that long, so you don't really get that much of it, but they are fun. And then, this is where the crazy shit happens. Because, out of nowhere, another Endbringer shows up, and Tattletale just tells the world, yeah, there's probably a 5th, too. Because this new one shows up to be the 4th, and they're like, yeah, there's going to be a 5th. These Endbringers don't matter. I don't even fucking remember their names. I didn't write their names down. They don't matter. They barely do anything. They show up, though. So, holy shit. As I wrote in my notes, this world sucks and is completely fucked, which is 100% the case. So that happens. And you think, okay, this new Endbringer shows up. Holy shit, they're going to go fight the Endbringer. No. The worst thing in all of Worm, it happens, in my opinion. Wildbow does a time jump. Now, I like time jumps. I'll be the first to say it. I enjoy myself a time jump when I'm reading a manga or watching an anime. I don't have a problem with them. They're, I think, done well. They're a useful tool to move the story forward without ironically, without wasting time, right? But Wildbow jumps 2 years, and it is the worst kind of time jump, because so much shit happens, and we just aren't privy to it. I don't mind not seeing it, or not seeing it immediately. Maybe if in like interspliced, we saw a couple chapters from here's something that happened here, and maybe not everything in the time jump is important, but in the post time jump, we learn, the 5th Endbringer showed up. We learn about the 5th and 4th Endbringer's powers and how OP they are. We learn a lot of the wards and heroes died fighting them, including people on Taylor's Chicago team, which is what the fuck? I thought they were main characters. I guess not. We learn that Brian, who, was dating Taylor, is now dating someone else. We learn that Imp killed Regent's father and has adopted Regent's, brothers and sisters, which is something I feel like I wanted to see, because that's important to Imp's character. Imp doesn't really have emotions, much like Regent, but now, she has emotions, but she's kind of an asshole, and now she's caring for these kids. Where so much shit happens. Where was the step? Why is this time jump here? Is all I'm trying to say. It doesn't really make any sense, and I hate it. That being said, I do think Wildbow redeems the story. This almost killed it for me. It killed any momentum where I read it and I was like, oh my god. I was going to finish Worm. I was close anyways, but it really puts a cork in the story. It just fucked everything up. But Wildbow did immediately win me back with the interlude after 25, which is from Bonesaw's perspective. We learn Bonesaw's real name was Riley, and she's essentially been brainwashed by the Slaughterhouse Nine, which makes sense. She's 10. I think, well, her body looks like she's 10. I think she's like 13 or something. And then, but she was like abducted when she was 10, right? So, clearly she's been mentally fucked up. And we learned she kind of doesn't want to work with the 9 anymore. Because the 9 go into cryo storage for the 2 years. And they expected Bonesaw to do it as well, but she just doesn't. And in those 2 years, she kind of like learns to like humans and learns to not want to be a serial killer. I mean, listen, she's still done fucked up shit. Nothing can redeem her. Like, she's insanely evil. But admittedly, she was also brainwashed. So, like, maybe there's some leeway there. But we also learn in this interlude that she has cloned all the members of the 9, and all the current members of the 9, and all the past members of the 9. And there are dozens of each of them, except one named Grey Boy. We'll get into Grey Boy later. But that's the end of 25, right? Maybe the weirdest arc, because it's just all over the place, and then time jump that doesn't work, and then Bonesaw interlude. But I think it's time to get into 26, which, per the Bonesaw interlude, is the return of the creepypasta team. So let's get right into it. Alright, fellow humans, I think I'm going to speedrun this back half of the video, because this video is already getting super long. It's taken me way too long to record it, and also edit the parts that I've already edited. And I just kind of want it to end. And I'm sure you watching at home also want it to end. But last we left off, the Slaughterhouse Nine finally came back to initiate the end of the world. And the reason I say I'm going to speedrun this is because so much happens in this back half. If you are watching this video and you have not watched Worm, if you have made it this far, I implore you to just go read it. I think there's a fan-made audiobook. I'm not sure where you can find that, so in the description I will just link the web novel, or, you know, where you can actually just go read it. We currently are on where are we? Hold on. We're on 26. So I have explained up to 26. I mean, I've done a pretty poor job of it, I might add. Because I've left out a lot of stuff. I've left out a lot of characters, a lot of their motivations, for the ones I haven't left out. But if you're like, I don't want to read everything I spoiled, go to 26 and just read it. Because the back half of Worm is a ride. And it's a very crazy ride with 1,000 different characters that I just don't have the time or energy to mention. So they fight the Slaughterhouse Nine. There's like 200 of them, because Bonesaw cloned a bunch of them. She cloned a bunch of the old ones, so you get a lot of new Slaughterhouse 9 powers. Again, the powers remain immaculate. I do not know how Wild Bow has come up with the powers and how he uses them the way he does. It's beautiful. It really, honestly, it's like, as a superhero fan, it is so much fun to see like new and unique superpowers get used in things. So just props all the way around. But yeah, they fight the Slaughterhouse Nine. Fucking everyone's working together. Heroes, villains, mercenaries, like, you know, the whole shebang is working together. And we're just gonna cut right to the chase. I love Jack Slash. He's a great villain. And you do get 2 chapters from Theo's perspective, where Theo fights Jack Slash and a couple of the Slaughterhouse 9 members. It doesn't go well for Theo. I mean, not that he dies, but it's not great for my boy Theo, who's probably my second favorite character behind Trickster. I really do like Theo, and he kind of gets his ass kicked, but he does, in the long term, like, him trying to fight them allows Taylor and the rest of the team she's working with to catch up to them, and they do end up restraining Jack Slash. After a long battle, they kill Grey Boy, or not, I don't think they kill Grey Boy. I mentioned Grey Boy last time. Grey Boy is so powerful that Jack Slash only had 1 clone of him made, because he could not possibly control more than that. He doesn't even know if he can control that one. And what Grey Boy can do is make a little bubble around you, and then you're stuck in there forever. And like, time is different. and you will net, like, even if Grey Boy dies, the bubble doesn't go away. So he's very OP. They stopped Grey Boy by sticking him in one of his own bubbles, which is an oversight on his powers part. Sucks to be him, I guess, that he can get stuck in his own bubble. And they end up subduing Jack Slash. Now, they don't kill him. They trap him in, like, PRT containment foam, which I just think is a mistake. Outright. Now, they're a little busy, I will say, and, you know, they're dying, and I understand it, but they should have shot that man. The second he is in that PRT foam, you pound his head in. That's what you just pound his head in, because, like, holy shit, what are you doing? Not that it matters. Now, they think they've won, but Theo was talking to Dinah, the little girl who can see the future, and she's like, no, we have lost. Like, it didn't matter. The world will end. Now, they don't really know what's what. They don't know why. Until Scion shows up. Scion shows up, and and Jack Slash kind of talks to him. Now, what I mean by that is, like, Jack Slash is behind an entire wall of PRT foam, so he's just kind of talking, but because Scion is, like, Superman, Scion, like, hears it. And Jack Slash is basically like, I don't know, just fucking murder everybody. Like, fuck this planet. What are you doing? You're a god. You've killed an Endbringer. Like, why are you being a bitch? And Scion goes, I mean, he doesn't speak, but he's like, yeah, why don't I just murder people? So Scion is the end of the world. That's what that is. Which is fucking crazy. It is, imagine if Superman was like 10 times more powerful than he is, and imagine if he just wanted to destroy the world, right? And now it's not like, I personally hate the trope of, like, oh, evil Supermans. Like, I think it's a dumb trope, but that's not, like, what this is. This is he isn't Superman. That's just the best comparison I have, right? Regardless, Scion just immediately, like, wipes the eastern seaboard out, you know, just wiping everything off the map. And we get some interludes from Scion's perspective, but they're from Scion's perspective before he was Scion, or they. I'm a little unclear, but essentially Scion was an alien, and there were 2 aliens. Now, these aliens were going to mate, but before they mated, they spread their, like, they have a name for it, but I can't remember the name. They spread these things, essentially like spores, across Earth, across a bunch of different Earths. And these spores allow you to get superpowers. So they attach to you, and then you trigger, and you get superpowers. Or, well, they technically attach to you while you're triggering. It doesn't matter. And here's the crazy thing, right? Full spoilers. Just completely, like, you still have a chance, but this is it. There are chapter titles. Now, I have not been saying the titles of the chapters because there's a lot of them. I didn't write them all down, and I just don't really have time to go back, whatever, yada yada. I'm lazy, is what I'm trying to say. I'm a terrible YouTuber, and I'm fucking lazy. Regardless, in this, there's 2 interludes, one from Science perspective and then one from the other alien's perspective. But in them, Scion, I believe, starts saying the titles of the chapters. And I'm bringing this up because at first, it's like, you're like, oh, that's a funny coincidence. But then he says them all, and he keeps going, which for me is the craziest moment in Worm. And it's really what I made this whole video to talk. I mean, I was going to make this video anyways, but once I finished Worm, it's what I wanted to talk about. Because you don't see this a lot. Wildbow planned he had this whole thing planned out from the very fucking beginning. Now, I don't want to say, like, everything he ever did in Worm was planned out. Every word. That's most likely not true, because that's just not how writing works. But it is insane to me that over 30 chapters, each being extremely long, because it's 30 chapters with, like, it's 30 arcs with chapters in them, I should say. But over these 30 arcs and all these interludes, he has had this entire ending planned out the whole time. And to me, that is insane, because this ending is insane. You know, you don't expect it, but then it happens and it makes so much sense. And it's just, applause. Truly applause for me. The amount of dedication and work that takes is insane, and something maybe one day I hope personally I can achieve. But that being said, how do they beat God? Well, everyone starts to work together until they don't, because people suck, right? They all start working with Cauldron, and the villains are coming together, and the heroes are coming together, but then, like, one team doesn't want to, and then the Case-53s, they want to kill Cauldron because Cauldron experimented on them, which I think is very valid, but also maybe why don't you hold off on that until, like, the god who's trying to destroy not just your Earth, but every Earth in every multiverse is dead. You know? Why don't you wait? They don't wait. Shit goes badly, and eventually Taylor tells Amy to experiment on her brain and try to, like, expand her power or something, or give her, like, a third trigger, you know, like, just make her stronger so that they can beat Scion, because Taylor's been kind of useless the whole time fighting Scion. There's just a lot of chapters of Scion killing characters you love, by the way. Like, Gru dies, and he dies off fucking screen, which is like, Wildbow, what the fuck, dude? A bunch of characters die. But Amy does it. She makes Taylor's power different. Now, doing this kind of lobotomizes Taylor. Like, she can't really English, and over time, she can't English. She can't speak or understand language. And at first, she kind of can understand language, but then more and more over time, it just starts becoming like Sim speak, and it becomes gibberish. But what this buff did to her is it allows her to control people. Now, it lowered her range to only about 15 meters, but she can control people. So what Taylor does is she kidnaps two people who work at Cauldron, the door maker, and then I forget the name of the second person, but it's the door maker can make teleporty doors, and then the other person can see anywhere on any Earth. So then Taylor, holding both of their hands while controlling them, uses them to essentially capture the mind of every living superpowered being on every single Earth. She goes and she grabs the tricksters from their peaceful Earth that's having no problems. She grabs people from Earths we have never seen before and superheroes we have never even heard of before. She grabs everyone under her mind control spell. She is mind raping all these people, which I have a very big problem with. I don't like mind control powers. It's just icky to me. But regardless, she mind controls all these people and then uses them all to kill Scion by just like beating his ass with powers so that he kind of uses too much energy at one moment and just kind of like ceases, right? Now, in doing this, they beat Scion. Yippee, they did it. But at this point, Taylor has gone insane. She's in like, they're in like a courtyard. She's also connected every Earth, so now there are teleport doors between every single Earth, and she kind of used that to like jump around. So I like that even at the end of Worm, it has like permanent effects on the universe. But everyone's cheering, right? They're all like, holy shit, we did it, we're alive, we killed Scion. And Taylor is going, she's so far gone that she thinks they're all fighting one another, and she's like, well, I'm just gonna have to kill everyone and start over. Like, whatever Amy did to her fully made her go insane. So all the heroes kind of team up, try to kill her. She ends up escaping, and then a character I haven't mentioned, Contessa, who is like the greatest assassin in the world and works for Cauldron, kind of shows up. And Contessa's power is that she always wins, or she can always see the path to victory or something like that. And Contessa shoots Taylor dead. And that is the end of Worm, which is kind of insane. Now, Taylor wants it. At the end, she kind of gets a brief, lucid moment and realizes what's going on and is like, yeah, kill me, Contessa. And Contessa does. And And then Worm ends. Happily ever after? Question mark? I don't know. A lot of characters are dead. Gru's dead. Taylor's dead. They tell you Danny, her dad, died. A bunch of fucking heroes died. Like, Trickster and his entire group died. Everybody died, basically. Not everybody, but a lot of people. We get a couple epilogues. The three most important that I want to talk about, because there's like 6 of them, and I don't really care. The 3 most important is we get a Dragon and Armsmaster / Defiant epilogue, where Dragon like finally gets a body and they can finally be together, and it's like a nice happy ending. I really like that, because over the course of the series I grew to really like Dragon and Defiant, especially their relationship. It's a fun relationship, so that made me happy. And then we get one from Imp's perspective, or not technically Imp's perspective, but like a villain's perspective that Imp is like hunting and then kicking the shit out of. And we basically learn the remaining undersiders, so Imp, Bitch, and Tattletale, who are kind of like the leaders, and now they've recruited some more people. They're going to keep the world safe. And their big goal is they're going to go after and hunt Teacher, who I briefly mentioned in this video. He doesn't matter. The sequel to Worm, Ward, is not about any of those characters, so maybe Wildbow will write more. I'm not sure. Maybe the sequel answers these questions, but it's not about them, so I'm not really going to talk about the sequel. And then we get one more epilogue. I should briefly mention, by the way, it is really depressing seeing the undersiders, because they're all sad that Gru died. You know, Regent's dead, that's all sad, and they're all like super depressed about Taylor, which is just really sad, you know, to read, especially growing attached to all these characters over the course of however fucking long Worm is. Very long. And then we get one more epilogue, and it's from Taylor's perspective. And it turns out whatever Contessa didn't kill Taylor. It fixed her brain, but her power is forever gone. And also, even though we were told Danny is dead, Danny was indeed alive. Gru is still dead. Gru is very much dead, but Danny's alive. Which is, I'll take that. You know what? I mean, I like Gru, but I'll take my Danny Hebert Best Dad Ever award, right? Give it to my man. But they have managed to make their way to a different Earth. One where Taylor's mother is still alive. And Taylor kind of goes up to her and has a conversation with her mother. She tells her everything, too. She's like, yeah, I'm your daughter from a different Earth. What's going on? What's good? Which is a little weird, I think. So it's a bit of an odd way to... I don't know. If that happened to me, which, you know, what the fuck, it wouldn't. But if it did, I don't think I'd tell him. Regardless, they have a conversation, or she has a conversation with her mother, and then Taylor and Danny are just going to live happily ever after on this other Earth. And that's Worm. Maybe one day I'll read the sequel, Ward. I probably will. But I need a very long break. And I have other very stupid videos in the works, so please look forward to that. But fellow humans, I gotta say thank you. If you made it this far, I'm sure there's only 5 of you, but if you made it this far, fellow humans, from the bottom of my heart, deeply appreciate that. You know, maybe consider checking out my other videos or something. I try to make at least monthly videos, sometimes weekly. It really depends. The shorter videos I can do weekly, but when I do a video like Worm, can't really do that weekly. But whatever. If you don't want to watch any of the other videos, that's also completely fine. And fellow humans, I'm going to say goodbye and farewell.